Chapter 1067. Soon, Neverwinter ushered in the day of the competition. Although the first Victory Day sports meet was arranged in a very hasty and crude manner, with neither an opening ceremony nor live commentary, it was undoubtedly a grand celebration for the local people. As soon as dawn broke, people spontaneously flocked to the Kingdom Avenue, trying to get a good seat near the front. Since the snow had not melted, almost everyone had a small bench or leather felt cushion, and many families came together. This scene amazed the traveling merchants. The hawkers, who had predicted the situation in advance, had already carried their bags full of food and drinks and loudly hawked their wares with the crowd. By noon, the center of the avenue, where the finish line was located, was already packed with people. A conservative estimate was that there were about 10,000 people, and there were still people coming from both places. Once again, Roland had a taste of the people's passion for entertainment in that era. It was definitely not easy to walk 28 kilometers on foot. He deliberately set the competition time at 2 o'clock in the afternoon to give his subjects enough time to prepare, but he did not expect the response from the people was still beyond his expectation. As the king of Grey Castle, he naturally did not have to squeeze with his subjects. As early as the day before, the Ministry of Construction had set up a step viewing platform that could accommodate 100 people for the high-level officials of Neverwinter. The First Army formed a defensive line around the platform, which separated the viewing platform from the crowd. Your Majesty, this is the list of participants. There are a total of 1,462 people. Scroll came over with a thick stack of paper, but due to the registration time limit, there are only the simplest classification and statistics. If you can give me 2 more days. It's okay. Roland waved his hand. The sports meet itself is to strike while the iron is hot. If it is delayed until after the expedition, it will lose the purpose of holding it. He casually flipped through the list, and found that Scroll was a little modest. The classification on the list not only detailed the residential area, but also the simplest summary of life and work experience. Scroll was probably the only one who could find such information in such a short period of time. In the list he saw a few interesting names. For example, his old friend Yorko, Lucia's sisterling, and the trio from the Alchemist Union, etc. There was no doubt that even if there were no witches participating in this sports meet, they would still have little hope of winning. Basically, they would go for the propaganda slogan of participation. Most of the people with the most hope of winning a place were concentrated on the first page. Roland set his eyes on the 2 people at the top, the Light of Dawn, Philin Eltek, and Chief Knight Carter Lannis. Do you think the champion will be born between the 2 of them? Scroll rolled up her hair and smiled. She didn't answer directly, but her expression had already given her answer. Your Majesty, it's almost time, Barov, who was sitting in the lower position, reminded. Okay. Roland put down the list and picked up the telephone beside him. Let the game begin. There's still one thing I don't understand. Gwells, who was dressed in a desert-style combat robe, was warming up in the crowd as he jumped and muttered to himself. The Great Chieftain's city is divided into 2 regions, right? Since we're all running toward the center, how can he ensure that everyone starts at the same time? The most important thing in a holy duel is fairness. If fairness is lost, not only will the honor be lost, but the reputation of the Great Chieftain will also be tarnished. Who knows, and this isn't the point at all, okay? Father, Rohan said with difficulty. Can you take off that hairband on your head? And the mink fur around your waist? He had never expected that after spending a large sum of money to watch The Wolf Princess, his father would be bewitched. On one hand, he repeatedly sighed at his daughter's beauty, and on the other hand, he was sad that he had forced his daughter to cover up her wolf parts for fear of being criticized by others. According to his own words, he was stupid and cowardly, causing Lorgar to suffer too much injustice, and also causing her to miss the most dazzling years as a divine lady. It could be said that he had not fulfilled his responsibilities as a father at all. Well, even if all these are true, it doesn't make sense for him to wear a cloth earband and tie a piece of fur as a tail. You're the chief of the Wildflame clan. Rohan screamed in his heart. If this image was spread to the port of Clearwater, how could he face the leaders of the other clans? This is my compensation to her. Don't say anything more, Gwells said seriously. Gwells said sternly. The fearless courage she displayed in the magic movie made me feel ashamed. She didn't care about what others thought of her, and insisted on the path she had chosen. That's what I taught her, but I didn't manage to do it myself. If you want to settle disputes, instead of hiding your flaws, it's better to show them generously. If more people can accept this appearance, the wolf Lorger won't be called a monster anymore. Rohan opened his mouth, but for a moment, he did not know how to persuade his father. I heard that you're questioning His Majesty's fairness? Suddenly, someone next to him said. Foreigners, you know nothing about His Majesty's talent. His masterpiece can connect two places in an instant, and people who are hundreds of miles away can call each other face to face. Do you see what's hanging above our heads? Rohan looked in the direction of the man's finger, and saw two huge cylinders hanging from a tree beside the road. They were black and swarthy, and Rohan could not associate them with telepathy. That's called a loudspeaker. It can amplify the sound dozens of times. When it's connected with a telephone, a magical device that can connect two places, it can ensure that we and the people in the Longsong area can hear His Majesty's password at the same time, the man said proudly. Oh, I see. Gwells clapped his hands and said. Since it can ensure fairness, I have to take it seriously. But uncle, you're really strong. It's just winter and you're already wearing a short coat. Don't you feel cold? He looked at Gwells curiously and said, and this pair of pointy ears. It's over, it's coming. Rohan closed his eyes with difficulty. He knew that Gwells would definitely make fun of him, and there would only be two results. His father would endure it and they would lose face, or his father would fly into a rage and beat Gwells half to death, which would leave a bad impression on the great chief. You're imitating the Ice Princess, aren't you? That's interesting. The man continued. Can you tell me where you bought it? Rohan could not believe his ears for a moment. Well. Just when Gwells was about to answer, the black cylinder, which was called a loudspeaker, suddenly made a shrill buzzing sound. Hello everyone. Buzzing. I'm His Majesty Roland Wimbledon. The noisy crowd suddenly quieted down. I think you're all familiar with the rules of the race, but I still want to reiterate here that the result is not the most important thing. This will be a challenge to yourself. As long as you do your best, you'll be a great winner no matter whether you run to the end or not. So don't put your mind on opportunistic tricks or obstructing others. Focus on your feet, and rely on your own strength to win glory. I'll be waiting for you at the finish line, and I wish you all a good result. Then I announce. Chapter 1068. All of a sudden, the crowd burst into action. Amid the cheers of the onlookers, hundreds of people marched along Kingdom Avenue towards Longsong's stronghold like a surging tide. The police, who acted as referees and rescuers, also got on their bicycles and followed closely on both sides of the crowd. These unconventional knights in uniforms and bright ribbons attracted the attention of many spectators. The same scene also took place at the starting point of Longsong area. At the same time, more than 1,000 people, with the same purpose, strode towards the finish line. Not to escape, nor to make a living, but to vent their energy without any scruples, regardless of the reward. This unconventional spectacle was destined to spread the name of Neverwinter to every corner of the continent. The curtains of the first organized long-distance running competition in the history of mankind began in this new capital. Sister, why didn't you participate? On the grandstand of the finishing line, Cole turned to look at Edith while Lance was leaning on the railing and yelling. If it's just a competition of endurance, you should be able to get a place, right? Perhaps it was because he had brought Lance over from his father's place. Lance had been in a good mood recently. Not only did he answer every question he had, but he also avoided the price of being teased. Otherwise, he would never dare to disturb his sister with such trivial questions. Oh, Edith squinted at him and said, so what if I got a place? But weren't you very keen on this kind of competition before? Cole thought. Otherwise, she wouldn't have been called the Pearl of the Northern Region. In his eyes, his sister used to be a person with too much energy. During the day, she would fight with a group of knights in full swing and defeat her peers single-handedly with a sword. The queue from Evernight Castle to the city gate could be formed. At night, she was the most dazzling flower in the banquet. She could drink with others and chat with them easily. Even Timothy could not forget her after seeing her once, which showed her charm, because she could be seen in most of the competitions and banquets in the northern region. She had become a household name in the region. In the past, she would never have missed this kind of celebration hosted by His Majesty. Because the family needed me to do that before. Edith shrugged. If I don't expand the influence of the Kant family as soon as possible, my father won't be able to get the dukedom. Even if I have to act like a clown to attract the attention of those idiots and please them. She stopped and sneered. You don't think I like doing that, do you? Cole could not help but feel a chill on his face. No, but now I don't need to sweat in exchange for His Majesty's attention. Fortunately, His Majesty did not pursue the matter. And I'm not alone anymore. Cole was taken aback. Not alone. Edith glanced at Lance, who was making a fuss, then looked back at him. I still have you guys, don't I? The chill instantly dissipated, and Cole subconsciously puffed out his chest. He wanted to say something, but he didn't know what to say. Edith just smiled and turned her eyes back to the high platform. Work hard in the administrative office. That's the biggest help you can give me. Huff huff. Gwells slowed down. How much more do we have to run? The sign we passed just now is 14, which means we're only halfway there, Rohan said worriedly. Father, are you all right? If you're out of breath, we can stop and rest for a while. There are still so many people behind us. As the race progressed, the crowd was quickly stretched into the shape of an arrow, and then a long line. Now even the line could not be seen. Obviously, it was not common to see people who could run for more than an hour without stopping. From the beginning until now, there were only a few contestants who could surpass them. At this pace, they should be able to finish the race smoothly, let alone get a good ranking. Rohan was more worried about his father's health. In fact, running was more laborious than crossing the desert. At least the former did not have a time limit. As long as they planned the route and ensured that they could get supplies from the oasis, they could eventually reach their destination step by step. However, running was different. To maintain a high speed, the consumption of physical strength would continue to increase. And his father had not done such strenuous exercise for a long time. You want to give up again? Gwells glared at him. Just because you're not the last one? If it were Lorgar, she wouldn't have said such words. When can you be like her, fighting with all your might for a goal and moving forward bravely? Have you never thought of beating everyone? In the past, Rohan would have chosen to remain silent. However, for some reason, he felt a sense of melancholy rising from the bottom of his heart, making his chest swell uncomfortably. How can I win? Should I poison my sister's cup? Or should I tell the public that she has turned into a wolf? Otherwise, how can I defeat a divine lady who has the power of 3 gods? I can't even defeat the head guard of the family. In order to stabilize the position of the number 1 clan in Ironsand City, Wildflame must have sufficient combat strength. It was not surprising that Lorgar caught up and became the best heir in everyone's eyes. However, he chose to stay silent and avoid internal conflict. Wasn't that an action for the clan? Why didn't you notice me? Perhaps it was because this place was far away from the Southern Territory, or because he had been holding back for too long, or because his father's appearance was too strange. Rohan argued loudly for the first time. I'm worried about your condition. If you weren't here, I would have run to the front. However, as soon as he finished speaking, he regretted it. His words were simply mocking Rohan for dragging him down. He twitched his mouth and wanted to say something to salvage the situation before his father flew into a rage. However, Gwells replied, Then you can run alone. Father, I mean. Rohan braced himself and turned his head. He expected to see his father's angry face, but he did not expect to see a smile at the corner of his mouth. This is the first time you've taken the initiative to reveal your thoughts, right? Gwells sighed. In fact, you're right. I'm really old. No matter how powerful I used to be, I can't change the influence of time. He paused. In that case, don't worry about me. You're actually good at long-distance running, aren't you? Rohan was startled. There's an old saying in the clan. If you practice anything for 10 years, even the stupidest person will become outstanding. Guel slowly stopped. Don't worry about me. I'll slowly get there. He clenched his fists and remained silent for a moment before replying in a low voice. Then I'll go first. Wait. Guel stopped him just as he was about to turn around. Put these two things on. Father. Even though Lorgar has left the clan, she's still a member of Wildflame and your biological sister. If there's anything we can do to help her, we should do our best. Guels personally put the boar headdress on Rohan's head. Go. Show the great chief what the Sand Nation of the Majin clan is capable of. Rohan did not reply. He quietly looked at his father, and then strode forward. The wind started to flow again. He ran faster and faster. At first he could still hear the exclamations of the spectators, but in the end, they were completely drowned out by the wind. However, Rohan did not feel tired at all. He felt that he could run even faster. At this moment, his body seemed to be full of strength. It turned out that his father had been watching him. In order to ensure that his sister's status was undisputed, he had endured countless criticisms, from both outsiders and insiders. Whenever he could not bear it anymore, he would quietly leave Iron Sand City at night and run alone between the small oases. It was a way to vent his anger and also to prove himself in another way. He was indeed not good at martial arts, but he might be better than Lorgar in other aspects, such as joint hunting. Endurance and persistence were the most important factors in a joint hunt to drive away the prey. Even though this idea was not realized in the end, Rohan had thought that no one would notice his little attempt, but now it seemed that this was not the case. You're actually good at long-distance running, right? If you practice anything for 10 years, even the stupidest person will become outstanding. His father's words repeatedly lingered in his ears. Really? So you've noticed it from the beginning? Rohan quickened his pace a little more. From the day he ran in the oases until now. Chapter 1069. Look, that's the light of dawn, someone shouted from the side of the road. Where? The one running in the first place. With the reminder of a sharp-eyed girl, a commotion broke out among the onlookers. It's really him. I thought I'd never see him again after I quit teaching. Wow, he's looking at me. Teacher Philin, come on. A tall, handsome man appeared at the end of the field of view. Although he looked a little tired, he still kept walking and firmly held the first place. What made everyone fall in love with him even more was that whenever someone cheered for him, he would try his best to smile back. When he met his former students, he would even wave at them. This amiable and gentle demeanor instantly captured the hearts of all his supporters. Honey, who was also in the same line of work, saw all of this. Philin Eltek, born in the Knight family, used to be an intermediate teacher in the Ministry of Education, and later transferred to the general staff. He was known as the Light of Dawn. If he wins the championship, what should I write? Shocking. A man in Neverwinter makes thousands of women fall in love with him. What do you think? Are you asking me? Vader, who was pedaling his bicycle, panted. Isn't thousands a little too much? Facing this witch who looked and behaved like a little girl, he did not dare to look down on her. As a key figure in the publicity department, her immediate superior was the King of Grey Castle, who had reached the peak of power at a young age. Moreover, it was said that she had a very close relationship with Her Excellency Vendi, the head of the Witch Union. If he treated such a witch like a little girl, he would definitely suffer in the end. Vader, who had been in the low-level patrol team for several years, naturally would not make such a low-level mistake. Therefore, when Honey came to him and asked for a ride to watch the whole competition from a close distance, he agreed without hesitation. Anyway, when Carter was not around, he would help with the police affairs, such as leading the team this time. It was no trouble at all for one more person. Of course, other than Honey's background, there was another reason why he was so enthusiastic. If the Security Bureau wanted to achieve results and nip all the hidden dangers that threatened the safety of His Majesty and the kingdom in the bud, they had to obtain as much detailed information as possible, which was exactly what the other party was good at. Therefore, no matter how he looked at it, it was necessary to befriend this witch. Don't worry too much about the details. Honey smacked her lips. If you saw this title for the first time, would you want to read it immediately? Yes, Vader replied honestly. That's good. The little girl whistled cheerfully. At this moment, a different voice sounded from the crowd. Don't you think that the man behind Teacher Philin is also very, not bad? A noblewoman covered her mouth and said, You noticed it too? I think he's much better looking than the light of dawn. Her words immediately caused a heated discussion among the people around her. I know him. The king's chief knight, Sir Carter Lannis. Look at the cloak on his back. There's the royal emblem on it. I see. No wonder he's the chief knight. But his expression is too cold. When he stares at us, it's like we owe him money. Alas, you're still too young. This kind of talent is more charming. Look, he's catching up. Come on, Sir Knight. Carter Lannis was also born in the Knight family. He used to belong to the Knight Regiment in King's City, and later moved to Border Town with Prince Roland. He could be said to be one of the oldest founding heroes. He was agile and powerful. It was even said that he had the ability to compete with extraordinary witches. He was also Skrull's favorite candidate for the championship. Honey listened to the messages sent back by the birds while recording the game in her notebook. As Carter continued to accelerate, the distance between the two gradually shortened, and soon they were running side by side. The cheers had also turned from one-sided to mutual support. It seemed that the previous title had to be changed again. After thinking for a moment, Honey put down her pen in high spirits. Whose family will the flower fall? The love and hatred between two men. Carter felt as if his lungs were burning. In order to let May recognize him at first glance, he put on a bright ribbon and a cloak. However, at this moment, the originally incomparably light adornment was as heavy as a mountain. Especially when he was running against the wind, he even felt as if these things were pulling his body. But he still did not want to take off the ornaments. Because May had knitted it for him with her own hands. Carter hoped to wear them to cross the finish line, before the light of dawn. Although May had never mentioned it to him, he had heard some old stories from the members of the troop. Before His Majesty moved to the western region, Philin had already been famous in Longsong. At that time, the light of dawn and the star of the western region were almost the envy of everyone. Everyone thought that they would be together, and his wife seemed to have fallen in love with Philin for a period of time. However, it turned out to be a misunderstanding. Philin always liked Irene, a newcomer in the theater. Although the matter was left unsettled in the end, Carter still had some resentment in his heart. So what if he was the light of dawn? She only liked him because a better version of himself had not appeared yet. He wanted to prove to those people that he was the most suitable person for May. And the first thing he had to do was to beat Philin Eltec, who was also a knight. Carter gathered his strength, stared at the opponent who was less than half a body's length away, and quickened his pace again. The viewing platform at the finish line gradually appeared in his field of vision. It was time to decide the winner. At this moment, he suddenly heard hurried footsteps behind him. Could someone catch up with him now? How was that possible? After all, an hour after the start of the competition, he and Ferlin had already left everyone else far behind. Even if they wanted to save their strength, they should not have waited until now to exert their strength. After all, sprinting consumed much more strength than running at a constant speed. Carter looked back in surprise. Wait, what was that? They saw a strangely dressed man of a different race rushing towards them, and the distance between them was shrinking at a speed visible to the naked eye. Judging from his skin color and tattoos, he should be a Majin Sandman, but what was up with the long ears on top of his head and the wagging tail behind him? Could it be that he had obtained strength by imitating a beast's ritual? This horrifying scene made Carter shiver all over. He felt as if he was being targeted by something terrible. He clenched his teeth and dashed toward the finish line. Amid the thunderous cheers of the audience, the three of them crossed the finish line almost at the same time. Did they win? Chief Knight panted and stopped after running for dozens of meters. He did not look at his opponent but looked straight at the top of the viewing platform. King Roland Wimbledon also stood up at this time. Congratulations! Not only did you successfully complete the race, but you also achieved an excellent result. His voice suddenly resounded over the Kingdom Avenue. Although the race is not over yet, the top 3 have been born in front of everyone. They are. Carter could not help but swallow his saliva. The third place is Carter Lannis. Hearing the result of the announcement, the chief knight closed his eyes unwillingly. Damn it, I'm still one step too late. The second place is Rohan Burnfire, a Majin Sandman. Roland paused for a moment. When the crowd quieted down, he continued loudly. The first one to reach the finish line is Sunflower from the Longsong area. Give them a warm round of applause. Who's that? Carter and the other 2 were stunned by the thunderous cheers of the audience. On the other side, Honey had closed her notebook and jumped off the back seat of the bicycle. Today's report is finally done. Thank you for your hard work. Have you decided on the title? Vader asked curiously. Yes, that's right. Honey smiled. Just write the result. That was enough to attract attention. Chapter 1070. Oh, that's wonderful, Barav exclaimed, stroking his beard. Even running can be so exciting. Indeed, when I saw the 3 of them running side by side, I felt my heart beat faster, Longsong Consul Perot echoed. Unfortunately, only one of them could get the commemorative badge. I have to say it's a pity. Is it really a pity? The old director smiled faintly. The one who won the medal is the contestant from Longsong. I'd rather do it a few more times than to be the center of attention. Don't say that. Miss Sunflower was just lucky. If there's no accident, you'll definitely get what you want in next year's Victory Day games. Really? I'm worried about that accident. Ha ha ha, it's not an accident if it happens often. Well, they can even hide their sarcasm in discussing the result of the game. They really get along well. Roland thought as he glanced at Barav and Perot, who were chatting happily beside him. Although they were nearly 20 years apart in age, there was no generation gap between them at all. They were indeed experienced politicians who had been in the political circle for many years. Since the first few contestants had been decided, everyone felt much more relaxed. They whispered to each other about the game while waiting for the rest of the contestants to reach the finish line. There was no doubt that this kind of competitive event, which was in line with the psychology of human beings in pursuit of their own limits, had a natural affinity and charm. The atmosphere in the witches' seats was the same. Looking at the eager girls, Roland could not help but raise the corner of his mouth. The witches were not allowed to participate because the gap between them was too big. In order not to dampen the enthusiasm of the public, such a rule was made. Not only people with magic power, but also God's punishment witches of Tequila were also excluded. But now it seemed that holding a superpower field was only a matter of time. He wondered what it would be like when they used their ability in various sports. Is the games in that world also like this? Anna's voice pulled him out of his thoughts. You looked quite absent-minded in the first half of the game. Because there was no commentator or live broadcast, Roland sighed. You mean you can let everyone know the progress and details of the competition at any time? Anna's eyes suddenly lit up. How do you do that? It's complicated to explain. He smiled. Do you remember the TV I mentioned? If it wasn't for the fact that he was used to watching the game in the future, this game could already be considered perfect. There were many responses, the players had a variety of styles, the process was brilliant, and the ending was unexpected. Carter, who was wearing a night cloak, and the Iron Zan nation of the Majin clan, who was cosplaying as the Wolf Girl, had stirred up a lot of discussion. According to the information from Scroll, Sunflower, the champion, was also quite dramatic. She used to be a Blackstreet rat, but after Longsong's stronghold was liberated, she became a glorious postman and ran through the streets and alleys of Longsong's stronghold all day long. It was this job that earned her the favor of the goddess of victory. Although there was a huge gap between Kuei and the other 3 in terms of strength, a champion was still a champion. Moreover, compared to the result, Roland cared more about the impact. Her aspiration undoubtedly made people think of the slogan, "Labor can change fate," which was exactly what Neverwinter needed. When the sky turned red, the first sports day basically came to an end. More and more residents gathered below the stage, forming a dense sea of people. Everyone was looking forward to the final award ceremony in high spirits. For Roland, What came next was the highlight of the show. He stood up, nodded to Echo, and then walked to the railing of the stand. A crucial war needed an exciting start. If he wanted to use a pre-war speech to inspire people's confidence, there was no better time than now. He slowly glanced at the crowd until it was completely quiet. My people, you've just witnessed a miraculous challenge. In less than 4 hours, many people ran 28 kilometers on foot, which is exactly half of the total length of the Kingdom Main Street. People from other territories may not understand its significance. In the past, it took at least 3 days to reach Longsong's stronghold from Border Town, and they had to travel day and night. At that time, if anyone said they could reach in 1 day with their own strength, they would only be regarded as a joke. But now, you've seen the answer with your own eyes. Whether it's building a road or running endlessly, it's the result of you surpassing yourself time and time again. I believe you've realized that the so-called impossible is just a shackle to be broken. And this competition is the best proof. Cheers suddenly sounded under the stage. Roland paused for a moment, stretched out his hand, and then said, "Now we're facing a new challenge, which is the demons. In fact, the war has reached a critical moment. After today, the First Army will march to the Fertile Plains and launch a second attack on the demons in Tequila City. These demons are extremely cruel and insatiable. Their claws and teeth once turned the prosperous human kingdom into a bloody ruin. Tens of millions of innocent people died in their hands, and their bones could fill the entire Neverwinter. So we have to fight, before disaster befalls everyone. We will fight them on the land, we will fight them on the sea, we will fight them in the air, until the devil is no more, and no enemy can threaten the living space of the human race. I'm very happy to see the Sand Nation of the Majin clan among the contestants, as well as those from the fjords and other kingdoms. This means that we've put down our prejudices and estrangement, and become closer to each other. And I dare say, this will also be the norm in the future. For the demons, human race, age, gender, and religion are all meaningless. The only thing they're interested in is killing everyone. So this is not only a war for Grey Castle, but also a war for the entire human race. My people, when you're afraid of the enemy, stop moving forward, or even want to retreat, think of today's miracle. As long as you hold on to your beliefs, we'll definitely win. Now, the top 10 contestants, please come to the stage and accept the honor you deserve. Roland said loudly. The crowd once again burst into deafening cheers. This time, the cheers did not stop for a long time, and blended into one with the afterglow in the sky. As expected of the great chief, Gwells took a deep breath and said, "His words make me want to go into battle again." He looked at Rohan and said, "Are you ready to go?" "Father, but I..." Rohan bit his lip and looked sad. "You didn't win the championship?" Gwells laughed. He held his son's head and rubbed it hard. "But you tried your best, didn't you? That's enough. Go, stick out your chest, hold your head high, and let everyone see the glory of the heir of Wildflame." Rohan trembled slightly. He looked at his father as if he wanted to say something, but in the end he just nodded. This time he did not cover his specially made head ornament and tail. Chapter 1071. Oh my God, it's really you. When Sunflower walked down from the spectator stand with a heavy bag of gold royals in her hand, she heard a very familiar voice. She turned around and could not help but smile. "Hey, Tiger Claw." "Ha ha ha, long time no see, Sunflower." Tiger Claw hugged her and patted her on the back. "When His Majesty announced your name, I thought it was someone with the same name. I didn't expect you to defeat the Chief Knight and the Light of Dawn. I'm so surprised. Wait, this feeling. Have you gained weight?" Sunflower pushed him away with a smile and punched him in the chest. "Go to hell. Compared to before, I only have skin and bones. This is normal, okay? No, I mean it's better to be a little fatter." Tiger Claw whistled. "At least you look more like a woman." He looked Sunflower up and down. "But seriously, your appearance has changed a lot. I wasn't sure when we were on the platform." "Really?" Sunflower shrugged. "My hair is a little longer and I eat a little more. Aren't you a lot stronger too? I trained on the construction site every day." Tiger Claw proudly raised his arms. "Huff, huff." Sunflower, wait for me. Xiao struggled to get out of the crowd and gasped. Hey, isn't this Tiger Claw? Look, this guy hasn't changed at all. He's still so skinny. Tiger Claw also gave him a warm hug. Don't tell me you also ran all the way here. Ahem ahem. Be gentle. Xiao smiled bitterly. I came here in the caravan owner's carriage. If it weren't for Sister Kuei insisting that I accompany her, I wouldn't even want to make this trip. You're a merchant now? Just a handyman. He scratched the back of his head embarrassedly. Doesn't this guy know how to read a few words? Sunflower curled her lips. He learns elementary education faster than the others. After passing the examination, he was chosen by a chamber of commerce. He sits in his room and deals with the account book every day. Life is so comfortable. I see. Fortunately you came. Otherwise, how could we coincidentally meet? Tiger Claw guffawed. Let's go to Neverwinter and have a good drink to celebrate Sunflower. Yes, but... Dawn looked around. Where's Snaketooth? Didn't he sign up for the competition? Sunflower's heart skipped a beat. In fact, she had wanted to ask this question for a long time, but she did not want to appear too eager, so she pretended to be nonchalant and looked at Tiger Claw. Could it be that he was left behind by you and went back by himself? He ran to the concealing forest alone to build the railway. Tiger Claw replied lazily. Although the pay is good, you might lose your life if you're not careful. What's the point of earning more? In the past, he even lived in the sewers. Now that he has a proper house, he's still not satisfied and wants to pursue a double room. Sometimes, I really don't understand what he's thinking. That was because it could provide a warm and comfortable home for the family, not just a shelter from the elements. Sunflower thought sourly. Of course it's for paper. Paper? Tiger Claw was confused. Hey, don't tell me you've forgotten about paper. Dawn poked him. She's our companion. I know, but what does it have to do with her? Tiger Claw was confused. Paper has joined the Witch Union and lives in the Castle District. She doesn't need us to provide her with a house. Besides, Snaketooth has seen Paper several times, but he didn't dare to greet her. He even pulled me to the side to hide. As a result, she still doesn't know we're here. What? Sunflower was stunned. You haven't seen Paper in more than 2 years? Tiger Claw shook his head helplessly. Ptahahaha. Sunflower grinned. Then he's really a fool. Somehow, she suddenly felt a lot more relaxed and even her steps became lighter. Sister Sunflower, lower your voice, Dawn said hurriedly. Everyone around us is looking at us. Sunflower did not care at all. Instead, she waved at the crowd and received a burst of friendly laughter. People had undoubtedly regarded her as a Miss Champion. It's so good to be famous. Tiger Claw sighed. 2 years ago, I never thought I'd have such a day. Compared with fame, the 100 golden dragons are more important. Dawn had a different opinion. If you use them to do business, you'll definitely earn more than work. Even if you don't know anything about it, you can find a chamber of commerce to invest in it. If you can make it big, you'll basically earn money without doing anything. No, I want to buy a house, Sunflower interrupted. In the border district. Huh. Dawn was stunned. But this is obviously a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. If you start from scratch, do you know how long it'll take to save 100 golden dragons? I know, but I've decided, Sunflower said without hesitation. Then what about your job? That's why I'm going to buy a bicycle, she said. You've seen how easy it is to ride. If I have a bicycle, I should be able to get back to the Longsong district in a day. No, in a morning. And there are a lot of letters that are delivered from both sides. Maybe I can make more money. You. Dawn looked at her for a long time and finally sighed as if surrendering. Whatever. I've never persuaded you anyway. Sunflower smiled, but her mind flew back to 2 years ago, the day of their separation. When the 4 of them stood on the dock, she had asked Snaketooth, "Will you come back?" But she never got an answer. At that time, she felt that she might never see him again. Border Town and Longsong Stronghold were so far away that even if they merged into one city, they were still worlds apart in Sunflower's eyes. After all, the farthest place they had been to was the garbage dump outside Longsong City. In her mind, Border City was an unreachable place. It was not until she was tempted by the reward of the sports meet that Sunflower set foot on the Kingdom Main Street for the first time. In order to cheer herself up, she forced Dawn to come with her. Unexpectedly, the distance between the two places was beyond her imagination. Compared with winning the first place, Sunflower was more surprised to find that the distance between her and Snaketooth was not that far. There were no winding mountain roads or bumpy roads. A straight black stone road connected the two places. For the first time, she felt like she was in a city. In that case, why should she wait for him to come back? She just needed to go there by herself. Just like what His Majesty said, the so-called impossible might really be a shackle to be broken. Before trying, who knows if it will be another miracle? Let's go to a tavern. I'll buy you a drink. Sunflower patted her purse. Oh, Tigerclaw clenched his fist excitedly. It's a pity that Snaketooth won't be able to enjoy it. Remember to save the money at the hotel first, Dawn reminded. Just bring 4 or 5 golden dragon coins. I know, Sunflower smiled. She did not know what the final result would be, but she wanted to try. Chapter 1072. The next morning after the sports meeting, when Roland walked into the reception hall, all the officials who had been waiting for him stood up in unison. Sit down. He walked to the main seat, looked around and said in a loud voice, I think you already know why I called you here. The war has begun. This is not just about the army. From this moment on, I demand that the managers of every institution and every department in the kingdom have a basic understanding of the situation and the trend of the war, and that they should play their role actively to deal with the expedition together. He said word by word, since the establishment of Neverwinter, everyone has made impressive achievements. But in the face of the crisis of the divine will, all these achievements are like a pavilion on a floating ice. If we don't conquer the Tequila ruins, the red mist may swallow the whole continent at any time. And then the demons won't be able to stop us. So this war can only be won, not lost. Yes, Your Majesty, Barav and the others said in unison. Very good. Roland looked at Edith and said, Next, the General Staff will explain the specific strategic direction. Yes, Your Majesty. The Pearl of the Northern Region stood up and said elegantly with her hand on her chest, Please allow me to explain using the big map. She walked to Roland's side and knocked on the map of the Western region on the wall. After many revisions and additions, the map almost included half of the barbarian no man's land, and Neverwinter, which was originally the center of the map, was now a small dot on the edge. Anyone who glanced at it would realize how small the human settlement was, which was one of Roland's original intentions. He hoped that his ministers and officials would be able to set their sights further, and not be obsessed with the little benefits they had now. First of all, we have to make sure that this northern expedition is different from what we've experienced in the past. It will last for a long time, Edith said directly. Edith went straight to the point. I hope everyone understands that we can't end this battle quickly. The tactic of concealment used in the Battle of the North Slope was impossible to be used again. The distance between the Misty Forest and the Tequila ruins was far greater than the distance between the destroyed outpost and the Misty Forest. It would take at least a month to build the railway, so it was impossible for the demons to not notice it. On the vast fertile plains, the enemy had the absolute advantage of mobility. Therefore, Roland had given up the illusion of a surprise attack from the very beginning. He planned to invest his superior forces and fight the demons head-on. Without a doubt, this would be a battle between spear and shield. Everyone already knew about this plan, so no one was surprised. Barav was the only one who asked, Then do you have an estimated time? It depends on the strength of the demon's counterattack. The General Staff asked the Tequila Witches to run mini simulations. Assuming that the scale of the enemy's attack is similar to that of the Battle of the North Slope, we'll be able to put the Longsong cannons on their faces in 3 months if they come once a week. But they are not fools. It is impossible for them to repeat the same mistakes again and again. That's right. I think the demons will soon notice the use of the railway, and even the Misty Forest behind us. Of course, we're not unprepared. Because the war is full of variables, I hope the administrative office can prepare for the worst and allocate resources. The worst is. Bearav frowned. From spring to winter, until the new months of demons, Edith answered frankly. Doesn't that mean we've failed? The old director grinned. That doesn't meet His Majesty's requirements. As long as they don't withdraw, the war will not end. It will be a stalemate at most. The Pearl of the Northern region smiled. We can continue the war when the snow melts the next year. Seeing the hesitation on the faces of the ministers of the administrative office, she added, but it's unlikely that this will happen. After all, the demons can't reproduce as fast as they can produce bullets. I just want to be prepared. Bearav thought for a moment and said, in this case, I need to transfer food from other territories as reserves. The golden twos have been distributed to all parts of the kingdom. If everything goes well, there should be a lot of harvest this year. If we collect all of them, we can basically meet the needs of the First Army for a year. No problem, Sirius Daly, the Minister of Agriculture, said. I'll write letters to the City Hall later. We also need to adjust the work of the Ministry of Chemical Industry, Bearav continued. We need to produce as much gunpowder and explosives as possible. We only have so many people, unless we reduce the production of perfume and soap. Kyle Sichi, the Minister of Chemical Industry, spread out his hands. Maybe we can rent a group of alchemy apprentices from neighboring countries to support Grey Castle. He looked at Roland. I heard that the King of Dawn also has several alchemy workshops. Although they are not in the City of Glow, if His Majesty asks, the King of Dawn will do his best to cooperate and won't care about the return date. In addition, the First Army has more than 100 people stationed in the Cage Mountain area. We can also consider alchemists from the Kingdom of Wolfheart and the Kingdom of Everwinter. In principle, no problem. Roland nodded with satisfaction. Come up with a plan according to your idea. Roland was very pleased with Edith's performance. At the beginning of the unification of the kingdom, he had thought that the new political system might need 2 to 3 years of running in before it could play its proper role. After all, changing their mindset was a rather difficult thing to do. Over the past few decades, these people had already gotten used to the mundane rule that all matters of the territory belonged to the suzerains, and that the suzerains did not interfere with each other. Suddenly asking them to open up their sights and view other territories as part of their control was too much for them to bear. However, he found that he had underestimated the charm of power. When the power in one's hands suddenly increased several times, even if they did not realize the nature of the change, they would try to use it. Bearav was one of the most outstanding ones. He not only saw the Kingdom of Dawn, but also the possibility of using the army to exert influence and seize resources from further places. After the discussion, Edith continued, but it's not enough to directly destroy the demon's encampment. For some reason, we have to eliminate all the enemies as soon as possible. This requires us to cut off the demon's retreat, including the sky and the ground, before the final attack, which only the witches can do. For some reason? Bearav was puzzled. Will taking a detour increase the risk for them? Because of the curse. Roland took over the topic. There's a senior demon among the enemies who can cast a magic curse from a distance. The mechanism of its action is not clear, but it's likely to be similar to the Church Witch Black Veil. If we let it escape, even if the First Army wins, it will be a Pyrrhic victory. There was a sudden gasp in the hall. The First Army lost more than 700 people just by eye contact, which was the largest casualty since the establishment of the army. That battle made everyone remember the name Black Veil. If the demons could also cast a curse through eye contact, then killing them first would be a natural choice. Roland glanced at Lightning, who had buried her head in her chest at the end of the long table, and could not help but sigh. He could completely guess her feelings. She would probably feel extremely guilty for letting her sisters take such a risk for her, even if they had no complaints. But now there was no better choice. Roland stood up from the main seat. In short, the goal of this expedition is to completely eliminate the threat of the obelisk before the Battle of Divine Will, and at the same time, weaken the demon's war potential. The operation is codenamed Torch. It is not only the light of hope to destroy the enemies, but also the original fire of departure that illuminates the entire fertile plains. Please do your best to open up new territory for Grey Castle. Everyone stood up and bowed with their hands on their chests. Chapter 1073. In the flight training field of Neverwinter. Hurry up. Walk faster. Keep your balance. Your legs are even weaker than a baby's. Direction. Watch your direction. Hey, where are you going? I really should put a row of braziers on both sides of the aisle. If you want to vomit, go to the side. Don't vomit on the wooden board, or you'll lick it clean. Next, good. Yes. Good shivered. He took a deep breath, walked to a swivel chair and sat down. Instructor Eagleface's cold face was also reflected in his eyes. Good shuddered even if he just looked at Eagleface. He heard that Eagleface used to be the commander of the garrison in the northern region. After returning to Neverwinter, he immediately participated in the internal military examination and became a member of the Air Knight Reserve team. This meant that he had not only experienced the Battle of the Church, but also gave up his vacation to devote himself to new training. In other words, he was the kind of person who was cruel to others and to himself. Good only felt great pressure when he was targeted by such a person. As soon as he sat down, his two teammates, Finken and Heinz, surrounded him. On their faces, Good saw that they were praying for their own good luck. Then the chair was quickly rotated. This was the most troublesome training since he joined the reserve team. In front of the swivel chair was a 5-meter-long, palm-wide wooden board, called the overpass. They had to be rotated for half a minute before they had to walk across the board. This was usually easy for anyone to do, but it was completely different after the rotation. Their body seemed to lose its center of gravity, and the world was shaking. It was not easy to maintain a standing posture, let alone walk on the overpass. Usually, Eagleface would divide the training into 10 groups, and the one with the worst performance would be punished with cleaning the toilet, cutting out the weeds, etc., or he would be forced to rotate for a whole day during the weekend. Good had tried it once. As a result, he vomited all over the floor in his dormitory while the others were enjoying their dinner. He did not want to experience such a terrible experience again. Stop. As Eagleface gave the order, the rotating chair was suddenly stopped. Good resisted the dizziness that rushed to his head and jumped off the chair. Quick. Don't just stand there, move. He clenched his teeth, raised his eyes, staggered on the wooden board, and walked to the other end. After more than 10 days of practice, he discovered a small trick, which was that staring at his feet made it easier for him to lose his balance. It was better to look straight ahead and use his body's memory to control his steps. When the soles of his feet touched something solid, Good realized that he had already walked to the end of the bridge. So powerful. He didn't miss a single step. This is the first time, right? A commotion broke out behind him. He turned around and looked at Eagleface. The latter curled his lips into a rare smile. Not bad. Looks like you're not hopeless. However, the instructor paused and his tone changed. Only one person has passed today. This is the worst result among all the classes. Her Highness Tilly has said that the aerial knight is 1 in a million. If you don't want to be eliminated by the entire team and end up doing miscellaneous things on the ground forever, then you better pull yourself together and practice harder. Rest for 5 minutes, then come again. Everyone immediately let out a cry of anguish. Hey, how did you do it? Finken came up to Good and asked, winking at him. Remember the distance of your steps and pretend that you're not dizzy. Just walk as you normally do. Can you even pretend? Heinz also came up to him. Isn't that equivalent to lying to yourself? The two of them were the same batch of applicants who had passed the assessment with Good. Therefore, they had become familiar with each other in just a few days. Moreover, the air cavalry had grouped them together according to the rule of 3, and they were now almost inseparable comrades. It doesn't matter if it's a lie or not, as long as you can pass. Good knocked his head. Generally speaking, the smarter a person is, the harder it is to lie to himself. You should be able to do it easily. Come on, Finken said indignantly. You've only succeeded once. Look at how proud you are. Let's make a bet. In the next group, I can succeed 3. No, 5 times. Then I'll take care of your laundry this week. Even underwear counts. Stop arguing, Heinz interrupted. What I want to know is, can you really become an air knight by practicing on the ground? The two of them were speechless. This was a question that all the trainees were wondering about. Walking on a bridge, rolling wheels, and identifying the direction of the wind. It was more like a sideshow than training soldiers. Her Royal Highness did not teach them personally. Instead, she taught the skills to the backbone of the First Army and let them lead the classes. In addition, the training was very tough. Not only did they practice from morning to night, but they also had to attend intensive classes at night to learn how to read and write. If not for Her Royal Highness Tilly's promise, most of them would probably doubt the authenticity of the announcement. However, the instructor was so strict that no one dared to bring it up. Who knows? After a while, Finken shrugged. At least the food here is good. We can eat meat every day and have extra meals on weekends. I don't think Her Royal Highness would lie to us. Good said thoughtfully. Didn't we get a bag of books the other day? My sister told me that there was a book called Flight Principles. It was written by Her Royal Highness. Maybe we'll know the meaning of these exercises when we master how to read and write. You're quite optimistic, Finken said with a grin. If I didn't look on the bright side, I would have died on the road to exile. Well, it's time for a break. At this moment, Eagleface's voice instantly drowned out everyone's whispers. Line up and practice in the same order as before. Yes, everyone said weakly. However, an accident happened. The door of the training room was suddenly pushed open. A man in a military uniform walked in and whispered something in Eagleface's ear. Eagleface nodded, saluted, and then turned to look at the trainees. Congratulations, the follow-up training is cancelled. You can continue to rest. Finken and Heinz breathed a sigh of relief, but Good held his breath. He clearly saw an ambiguous smile on Eagleface. There was sarcasm, ridicule, and schadenfreude in it. But not here, Eagleface said. Don't think that I don't know what you're complaining about in private. Unfortunately, with your poor brains, you won't understand even if I explain it to you. But you're in luck. Now there's a chance for you to witness the true meaning of the term, empty night. The true meaning of empty night? Good suddenly felt his heart beating faster. Chapter 1074. They left the training room and headed south along the cement road. There were brand new red brick houses everywhere on the road. Some had just been built, and some were still under construction. According to Finken, a year ago, this place was just a wasteland near the sea with nothing but a few lonely tree trunks. But now, the construction team had turned this place into a city within a city. It was surrounded by walls. Although not high, they were high enough to separate this place from the outside world. The warning signs painted on the walls read, "No climbing over. Violators will be shot," which discouraged those who wanted to sneak in and out. Inside the walls, there were dormitories, canteens, sports fields, training rooms, classrooms, and so on. And there were more than one. It took Good a day to figure out the meaning of these strange words. In short, they could eat, dress, live, and study inside the walls. This was probably what the instructor meant by closed management. Last but not least, this place was extremely large. He had been here for several weeks, but he had not seen the corner of the walls. Of course, this also had to do with the limited range of activities for students. Without special permission, they could only travel between the dormitory and the sports field. All of this had happened in the span of a year. Good, who had just moved to the western region in the winter, had never felt it directly, although he had often heard people mention that Neverwinter was famous for its amazing construction speed. It was not until he entered this city within a city that he understood what it meant to be fast. The southern end of the sports field, which had been empty a week ago, was now filled with red bungalows. In other cities, this efficiency could be described as unimaginable. After passing through the wall of the sports field, the team began to talk. This was a place that they were forbidden to enter. Today, they could finally see the whole picture of this place. It was an extremely open and flat land. There was no obstruction as far as their eyes could see. The blue sky and clouds occupied most of their vision, And a little further was the boundless swirling sea. The slightly chilly sea breeze blew against Good's face, making him feel refreshed. He had to admit that when he was used to seeing the red brick houses in front of him, he suddenly felt that the whole world had expanded when he saw this scene. Strange. I thought there would be something extraordinary here, Heinz murmured. Isn't it just an empty space? Yes, it was an open space. Apart from a few blackstone roads that were wider than the main streets of Neverwinter, there were no other conspicuous buildings. The fact that it was designated as a restricted area was really confusing. Maybe they're worried that the scenery here is too beautiful, and they're afraid that we'll lose our footing and fall into the sea. Finken grinned. But I think that if the classroom is moved here, I'll be at least 30% more enthusiastic about studying. Are you saying that 0 times 3 is still 0? Someone beside him mocked. Hey, are you challenging me? Finken glared at him. How about we compare our scores? Let's not talk about this. Look over there. Good raised his eyebrows. Someone has already arrived. It's another class. Heinz's words made the whole team quiet down. Although they had never had direct contact with him, they had heard from their instructors how excellent he was. He had said that he completed all the exercises in one day, asked for extra training at night, vomited but still could not get off the swivel chair. In short, he was determined and hardworking, while they were like a bunch of fools who had wasted their talent, and were inferior to him in everything. This made them subconsciously regard him as an enemy. Raise your heads. Don't look away. You'll lose if you do. Everyone cheered him on. The expressions of those people weren't any better. Seeing them coming, the students who had arrived first stared at them coldly with a straight face. They did not have the self-awareness of being excellent students at all. The tense confrontation did not end until the two teams separated. All right, let's just wait here. Eagleface led everyone to the Blackstone Road and stopped. But remember, no matter what you see, don't leave your position. His Majesty the King and Princess Tilly will both be present. Any reckless actions will be seen as dangerous. You should be very clear about the consequences. Will the King also come? No, he should be here already. Good noticed that the shed on one side of the open space was surrounded by soldiers and policemen of the First Army. Apparently, only the King of Grey Castle could command the two departments to come out and protect him. It seems that the aerial night is really extraordinary. Good could not help but look forward to the next development. As for Eagleface's last meaningful sneer, he forgot about it for a moment. Inside the hangar, it was a different scene. The first large glider, the Seagull, had completed all the preparations and was ready to set off. This was also the first manned glider that Tilly had officially built after she mastered all the operating procedures of the experimental glider. Compared to the simple frame and thin wings exposed during the test flight, it not only had a larger body and wider wings, but it also wrapped the frame with a skin and added auxiliary equipment such as portholes, seats, and a rear-opening airtight door that was easy to ride on. All in all, the Seagull finally looked like a complete plane. Most of the gliders that had appeared in history were used to supplement the shortage of transport aircraft. Basically, it was common to save as much as possible, so the wooden frame and canvas skin were common. After all, a hole in the frame would not affect the flight. Compared with its crude predecessors, the Seagull was built on the other extreme. Aluminum alloy and high-strength steel were only the foundation. Every large part could be cut in one piece without bolts or welding. Non-structural components were densely covered with small holes to reduce the weight as much as possible. The magic coating could ensure that air would not leak when there was a large air pressure difference between the inside and the outside. The bottom of the belly was also equipped with landing armor. As long as it did not lose its balance and roll over, even if it crashed, it would be safe. After all, it was carrying witches. As the only model that would be produced, safety was not an exaggeration. Then, I'm boarding. Anna gently kissed Roland's cheek. See you tomorrow. Be careful. Don't force yourself, Roland said seriously. If you encounter demons, remember to protect yourself first. She smiled and said, I know. You've said it dozens of times. Please rest assured. I'll protect her. Phyllis, the god's punishment witch, said solemnly. After a while, Roland let go of Anna's hand and nodded slowly. Go. I'll wait here for you. After the railway was built to the turning point, the First Army first opened up a piece of flat land on the edge of the forest as an airport. The distance of more than 500 kilometers made it impossible for any means of transportation other than Maggie to arrive in one day. Therefore, the importance of the glider was highlighted. Chapter 1075. After everyone boarded the plane, Tilly walked up to Roland and asked, "What's wrong? Are you still worried?" "You can tell? It's only been a day, but everything you've said sounds like a farewell. It would be strange if I couldn't tell." Tilly shrugged and said, "Are you doubting my skills or Anna's ability?" Faced with this dilemma, Roland could only smile bitterly for a moment. The structure of Seagull was extremely simple. Apart from a few operating rods and corresponding steering surfaces, it was basically a container for people. It was not much more complicated than the prototype. With Anna's processing skills, it was difficult to even think of a problem. After it was built, it had also conducted a few test flights and simulated an emergency landing. The results were very satisfactory, not to mention Tilly's extremely strong control skills. Vendi had also made great progress in the run-in. She could always find the right airflow to keep the plane stable at all times. And for the safety of this long-distance flight, Xavi and Molly were also brought along. It could be said that it was foolproof. But even so, he still felt nervous. Half of the elite witches in Neverwinter were gathered on a brand new aircraft, and were going alone to the hinterland of the barbarian land 500 kilometers away. This was enough reason for him to worry. If not for the fact that he still had a lot of work to do in Neverwinter, he even wanted to take Seagull with them. After exhaling softly, he looked at Tilly and said, "I think it has nothing to do with suspicion. It's just that you care too much. I hope that all of you can live safely to the new era after the end of the divine will." After the two of them looked at each other for a moment, Tilly turned her head away and said, "I know, I'm just joking. If it were me, I would also feel uneasy." Before Roland could react, she had already turned around and stepped onto the gangway. "Then I'm off, brother." After the cabin door closed, a guard walked over and said, "Your Majesty, everything is ready outside." Roland took a deep breath and replied in a low voice, "Let's begin." "Yes." As the command was given, the procedures began to run in an orderly manner. "The limiter has been activated. The road is cleared. All personnel leave the runway. Open the door." When the door of the hangar slowly slid open to both sides, the dazzling sunlight shone into the room, projecting a path of light on the ground. The guide raised the green flag. "Seagull, ready to take off." At the same time, the siren resounded throughout the airport. Roland felt the wind rising. It was a wonderful feeling. He was standing in a position where there should be absolutely no wind, but he could still feel the gentle breeze brushing his cheeks. It was unfair to compare the Seagull to its peers as a pure glider. What the latter had been trying so hard to obtain, the Seagull had from the very beginning. The airflow defied common sense and appeared precisely behind the wing surface. The breeze pushed the raised ailerons like an invisible hand. This kind of power seemed insignificant, but Roland knew that it was the result of Vendi's deliberate control. The remaining wind that dissipated was gentle, but within the range of a few fingers from the wing surface. It was a strong wind that could make it difficult for people to move even an inch. In other words, within the area affected by Vendi's ability, the direction and speed of the wind were all controlled by her. This also meant that the Seagull did not need to rely on its wings to maintain flight. It could also perform actions that would leave other gliders dumbfounded. For example, it seemed to be a short vertical takeoff and landing. Speed was only in exchange for greater lift. If it could directly obtain lift, speed would naturally not be an indispensable factor. Of course, such a light flight might be a shocking feat in the eyes of an expert, but in the eyes of a layman, it was obviously lacking. What could be more shocking than a huge thing that weighed several tons whizzing past one's head, and then slowly climbing up until it disappeared into the clouds? Thinking of Tilly's expression when she excitedly proposed this idea, Roland could not help but shake his head in amusement. It seemed that she had completely treated the Seagull as her big toy and could not wait to show it off to others. Woo! Woo! As the steam whistle sounded, Good also noticed the strange scene at the end of the Blackstone Road. The soldiers dispersed and the iron door of the shed opened. A strange-looking gray giant bird slowly glided out, turned a small half-circle, and drove onto the road where they were. Hey, look, what's that? Clearly, he was not the only one who had discovered the giant creature. A train? It doesn't look like it. There are no tracks on the ground. It's probably a new machine invented by Her Majesty? Could it be the one that Sir Eagleface was talking about? It seems to be coming towards us. Wait, he seemed to have seen this thing somewhere before. Good pondered for a while, and suddenly a thought flashed through his mind. Wasn't there a similar cover image in the books that Princess Tilly had given him? It looked like a bird, but it was not. The slender and symmetrical wings indeed looked somewhat similar to the seagull. But after thinking for a while, he felt that the two did not match at all. Not to mention the difference in appearance and the number of wings. From the cover, he could at least see the pilot, and he could roughly understand why the thing in the picture seemed to be floating in the air. After all, a skeleton not much bigger than a human supporting a pair of huge wings. In a sense, it was like a magnified kite. Although he knew that the thing that the king and princess valued would not be so simple, it was still reasonable to think it through. But the thing in front of him was completely the type that could not be understood. Comparing it to the surrounding soldiers, it could be seen that it was far larger than the former. Other than its wings, its entire body was round, and its whole body was wrapped tightly. Its slender belly seemed to be able to stuff a lot of things. According to this size, not to mention flying, it should even be difficult to crawl on the ground. But the next moment, Good realized how ridiculous his thoughts were. The other party began to accelerate, and it soon surpassed the speed of a horse, and it did not seem to have the slightest intention of stopping. The team, which had been discussing fervently at first, unknowingly quieted down. Everyone could hear the rumbling sound coming from afar. My God! Finkin swallowed. It's going to hit us. This was also the common feeling of most of the preparatory trainees. Logically speaking, as long as they stood still, the two would not really hit each other. But even so, their bodies seemed to be trembling uncontrollably. Not everyone could remain calm in the face of a giant beast that could trample them into meat paste with one foot. And this was such a giant beast. They were not even as tall as the other party's wheels. As it got closer, the whistling sound of the wind was almost like a roar, and there was a slight tremor on the ground. It was said that when the knight charged, the sound of the horse's hooves alone could make the enemy collapse. But compared to the monster that was pressing down on him like a mountain, Good found that the knight was nothing. He suddenly remembered the indecipherable sneer of Eagleface. Instructor. Had he already experienced it? Before he could think about it, a gust of wind swept past. In a short period of time, it had covered a distance of hundreds of meters, running straight through the crowd on both sides. Under the impact of the airflow, Good finally could not control his feet. His knees gave way and he fell to the ground. Perhaps he had subconsciously dodged before the gust arrived. He did not bother to get up, but turned his head to look behind him. And the next scene made him even more dumbfounded. He saw the giant beast raise its head, its feet left the ground, and suddenly soar into the sky, flying toward the blue sky. The sun shone on its wings, forming a colorful circle of dazzling light spots. Is this the aerial knight? Good could not help but clench his fists. Chapter 1076. Roland did not look away until the seagull had completely disappeared into the sky. Sometimes I think it's better to build a frontline headquarters, he whispered. Staying in a place where everyone can see it can boost morale, and also be considered to have personally participated in the Battle of Divine Will. In the future, when historians record it, it'll be a little more to brag about. Do you still care about that? A reply came from the void. Besides, before being recorded in history, you have to endure Vendy and Scroll's incessant chatter until you admit your mistake and change your mind. I've experienced it before, and it's definitely not something an ordinary person can endure. It's better not to give them more trouble. Roland could not help but laugh. That's true. The battle with the demons was likely to last for months or even years. He had to work hard to adapt to this new normal. Thinking of this, he looked at the guards in the distance. Summon everyone. I'm going to the third border city. The latter immediately saluted and said, Yes, Your Majesty. I'll inform the guards right away. According to Kyle Sichi's report, there was new progress in the research of the rubber worms. It was time to test the results. Let's go. He nodded to his side, and then walked toward the exit of the airport. After confirming that the secretions of the rubber worms had important uses, the tequila witches not only opened up a series of new caves for them, but also took on the role of keepers in their spare time. After all, it was not easy to find ordinary people who could face the devouring worms calmly and talk cheerfully in the worm caves. In addition, long-term work in the underground could easily lead to psychological instability. The breeding part was now completely taken over by the tequila witches, and the workers were only responsible for the loading and processing of the rubber. It could be said that this was another miscalculation by Roland. He underestimated the tolerance of people in a claustrophobic environment. The rubber worms hated sunlight, liked humidity, and would move according to sound. Even if they were not aggressive, the rustling sound from time to time was enough to weaken people's spirit. He was also unable to provide lighting and communication equipment for every worker, formulate detailed shift rules, and come up with a set of psychological comfort guidance. It was not that it was impossible, but that the cost-performance ratio was too low. There were a lot of factories outside that needed manpower, and he could just pull them in and use them. There was no need to waste time on de-witching them. Therefore, he simply transferred the ordinary people to the more relaxed follow-up process. Prius Dessau, the knight of chickens and ducks, did not stay idle either. He used his free time to write breeding manuals and guide the production of chickens. He also played a significant role in the rapid growth of related products in Neverwinter. The expanded breeding scale provided more samples for the glue test. It was because of this basic research that Roland had the conditions for the Minister of Chemical Industry to intervene and carry out the next step of the plan. After entering the underground, Pasha came forward and said, Welcome, Your Majesty. Your people are now in the rubber worm lab. Do you need me to inform them? No, you can take me there, Roland said with a smile. By the way, I heard that Celine has built a new farm, which is bigger than the previous ones combined? Yes, it's opposite the lab. Pasha nodded her main tentacle. It not only uses the latest research results of the Quest Society, but also uses ideas from the dream world. Do you want to visit it? Oh, he suddenly became interested. Of course. Then please come with me. After passing through a long passage, Pasha took Roland to a large cave. The entrance of the cave was equipped with iron bars, apparently to prevent the insects from escaping. Entering the cave from a small door on the side, he could not help but be slightly stunned. The environment in the cave was completely designed according to the Snow Mountain ruins, with luminous plants, water plants, and giant mushrooms. However, the three had obviously been adjusted reasonably. The plants were arranged along the edge of the stone wall and the flowing water, just like new street lights. As the main food of the insects, mushrooms were obviously the most abundant species. The huge mushroom umbrellas almost covered the ground tightly. Countless insects swarmed inside, and under the dim fluorescent light, only groups of white wriggling bodies could be seen. They happily gnawed on the mushrooms, and the dense crunching sound reminded Roland of the silkworms he raised when he was a child. But what surprised him more was the size of the cave. Judging from the endless luminous plants, it was probably even bigger than the main hall of the third border city. He had thought that the new farm was just a combination of several old caves, but now it seemed that it was not the case. The orderly blue light spots and the straight water system made him feel a little like a large factory. This is just the edge of the impassable mountain range, and the height of the surface of Neverwinter is the same. Pasha took the initiative to introduce. If we open the cave from the south, it is only a kilometer away from the Kingdom Main Street. Didn't this mean that the new farm was only separated from Neverwinter by a wall? If he remembered correctly, he estimated the distance they had moved just now to be no more than 2 kilometers away from the main city, and the outside of the stone wall should be the temporary residential area for the immigrants. To facilitate the transportation of mucus? Roland asked thoughtfully. Exactly. Pasha raised her main tentacle. Your Majesty, please look at the south end. He looked in the direction Pasha was pointing and saw a deep horizontal ditch under the wall, as if it was specially left for the rubber worms to escape. What's that? Material retrieving area. Pasha explained. Celine made use of the insect's ability to attract sound to cut a narrower and narrower passage in the wall. As long as a specific chirp was made at the other end, they would drill into the passage and move toward the source of the sound. But limited by the width of the passage, they could only poke out half of their heads at most, and their bodies would be stuck in the passage. And then? Nightingale, who had been listening on the side, could not help but ask. Next, we'll activate the magic core at the end of the passage, Pasha continued. It has been adjusted to the sharp blade mode. The cyclone is generally used to defend against enemies in narrow passages. The core will emit a beam of magic light, which will fill the entire passage and tear up any obstacles in front of it. The horizontal passage is the path that the magic light will pass through. The worms will be divided into two, and the mucus in their bellies will gather along the drainage groove in the horizontal ditch. In this way, we don't need to kill them one by one, and we can get a lot of mucus at once. She paused for a moment. The reason why we reserved a distance of 1 kilometer is for the gatherers. According to Celine's idea, ordinary workers could enter the material retrieving area from the outside of the mountain, but they would not see anything except the ditch and the pool with the mucus flowing. This way, it would be convenient to collect, and it would not easily cause panic. Roland was speechless for a moment. He had nothing to add. This plan was very mature with the current technology, and it took into account the whole process from breeding to harvesting. If a rubber factory was built outside the mountain, the production and processing would be covered. Especially this kind of modern, flowing line of slaughter, which was worthy of the concept learned from the dream world. However, was it a bit overkill to use the precious magic core and Celine's lifelong research as a crude butcher's knife? Even if you can't find the chosen one and activate the instrument of divine retribution, you don't have to give up like this. No, Roland suddenly found a problem. How many rubber worms can this farm hold? It is estimated to be about 100,000, but given their breeding speed, it will take about a year to fill up this new farm. What about the corpses after the mucus is collected? He asked. Where are you going to transport them? This was not a small problem. Roland had seen in a documentary that a modern chicken farm produced hundreds of tons of chicken manure every day. A little careless handling would cause serious soil and water pollution. Once the scale was enlarged, any small detail could cause great trouble. God's punishment witches could carry the corpses now, but if the worms multiplied to more than 10,000, it would be easy to kill them, but not so easy to clean up. If the corpses could not be disposed of in time, they would definitely cause a catastrophic impact. Don't worry, Your Majesty. Pasha chuckled. Fran and the others don't refuse anyone. In fact, the consumption of the 3 worm carriers to dig with all their strength was a bit shocking. Gurgle. After understanding the meaning of this sentence, Nightingale made a sound like her stomach was moving. Okay. Now Roland finally understood why there was a small door at the entrance, but there was a superfluous reason to install a large fence. Chapter 1077. After visiting the farm, Roland went to the rubberworm laboratory. The 30-square-meter room looked like an ancient wizard's alchemy room. There was a row of rubber buckets filled with mucus on the wall, and the solidified milky white glue was everywhere. A large pot was full of burnt rubber blocks, giving off an unpleasant smell. Only God knew what they had put into it. The long-handled ladles, buckets, and stirrers used in the experiment enhanced the smell. If they had added a few toads and bats, it would have been a perfect restoration. Your Majesty, Kyle Sichi nodded to show his respect. I think I've found what you wanted. Roland noticed his pale face and the gauze wrapped around his fingers. Are you hurt? It's just a small problem. It doesn't matter. He waved his hand and handed over a glass of light red mucus. Your Majesty, please have a look. Kyle turned the glass upside down, but the liquid did not spill out. Instead, it slowly wriggled along the wall and formed a soft hemispherical mass at the mouth of the glass. Roland's eyes lit up. He reached out to catch the jelly-like mass, but was stopped by the chief alchemist. "No, Your Majesty." He took back the glass. "This thing is corrosive. I remember that rubber worm mucus should be non-toxic and harmless," Roland said, raising his eyebrows. "Otherwise, it wouldn't have been used to make food bags and straws. But after mixing it with blood, it did change its nature." "Blood?" Roland was slightly stunned and could not help but look at his fingers. "Was the wound on your hand for the experiment?" "Of course not, it was just an accident," Kyle said while stroking his beard. "Even if I was crazy, I wouldn't go so far as to use myself as an experiment. The path of chemistry is so long, and I still hope to go further." After listening to Kyle's explanation, Roland finally understood the process of the discovery of the new colloid. The solidification of rubber worm mucus came from the mixture of glandular secretions, and according to the difference in the ratio of the two, biological rubber with different hardness could be formed. But they were not mobile, and once consolidated, they could not be changed. At first, according to his experience in chemical experiments, Kyle added various elements or acid and alkali liquids in groups, but he could not change the final result. After that, he further expanded the selection of materials, from complex inorganic salts to organic substances, to observe the effect. Although many interesting special colloids were found in the process, he still could not get the new gel that Roland wanted. Until an accident happened. When he cut the waste rubber strip, he accidentally cut his finger, and the dripping blood contaminated a cup of experimental sample. The cup suddenly emitted a large amount of white gas, melting the bird beak mushroom into a pool of yellow liquid. The solution had also turned into a semi-coagulated gelatinous substance. Its biggest feature is that it can retain the characteristics of the mixed materials. Kyle threw the gel into the furnace, and it immediately emitted a bright light. The flame also rose several feet high, unlike the rubber block from before, which slowly turned black and finally turned into a pile of powder. "I only added a spoonful of grease. Burning it alone might not be able to achieve such an effect, but I can say that it's better than what you requested." Although the old alchemist sounded tired, his tone was filled with excitement. Looking at the exuberant flames, Kyle's eyes also seemed to have a group of flames burning. He had already imagined the scene of this gel being used in large quantities in his mind. Napalm was what Roland was trying to make. It was originally made from gasoline and special thickeners. Compared to the liquid fuel that had an extremely low flash point, was flammable and explosive, and was difficult to adhere to. Not only was it much safer to use, but it was also more lethal. When ignited with explosives, it could instantly create a large area of burning. Not only would it be very difficult to get rid of it, but at the same time, the blazing fire would also accelerate the consumption of oxygen, causing people to suffocate to death. When he saw that the slime of the rubber worm had a similar solidifying property, he began to think about it. If he could completely fuse the slime with the kindling and make it burn, he could get a simple but brutal weapon. After all, the red mist was afraid of fire. During the Tequila era, the most troublesome thing for the Union were the outposts that had already been built. The red mist covering a small area made the blessed army helpless. They could only rely on the witches who had the ability to isolate or clear the mist to lead them forward slowly. And the task of dismantling the mist storage towers fell to the common army. Often after a battle, the blessed army would pay a great price because they could not move flexibly, and the common people would never return. It was under such a cruel trade-off that every outpost built by the demons could weaken the power of the Union, until the latter could no longer stop the actions of the demons, and was finally dragged down by the demons from all directions. If they could have the ability to set fire at will, the threat of the enemy outposts would be greatly reduced, and the red mist that the demons relied on for survival would become a noose around their necks. It was probably because of the deep impression of the defeat that Pasha and the witches were so concerned about the rubber worms, especially Althea. At first, she was quite critical of the unknown insects raised in the third border city, but after Roland explained the idea of solid fuel weapons to her, her attitude changed completely, and even her tone when she mentioned the worms was different. Now Roland did not have to fight the demons at close range. Before all the moving targets disappeared, he would not let the First Army leave the range of the artillery. Therefore, the incendiary bombs were more of an auxiliary attack method, a product of the don't put all your eggs in one basket mentality. Without them, the entire strategic plan would not be affected, and with them they could save some gunpowder and reduce the production pressure of the chemical plant. Under this premise, it was naturally good that Kalsichi could find something, but the problem was, blood is not a material that is easy to obtain. Please rest assured, Your Majesty, the alchemist replied. It doesn't have to be human blood. The blood of cattle, sheep, and other animals can also change its nature. I've tested this. The only condition is that it must be released just now. This made Roland feel a lot more relieved, but then came the second question. Why blood? This. Kyle was speechless for a moment. I think it may have something to do with the worms themselves, Pasha continued. Although it is no longer controlled by the multi-eyed monster, its instinct is still there, which is to capture and store prey. I'm afraid fresh blood is one of the conditions. This speculation is quite reasonable, he thought. Obviously, the multi-eyed monster doesn't want food, so storing it in its original form or in a gelatinous state may not make much difference to it. Then start the weapon test as soon as possible, Roland ordered. Since we have the ideal raw material, the next step should not take much time. You can leave the rest to the colleagues in King's City. After all, as you said, the path of chemistry is very long, and it is right to pay attention to rest. Yes, Your Majesty, Kyle said with his hand on his chest. I have another idea, Pasha suddenly said. What is it? Roland looked at her. Maybe we can take a special audience with us during the weapon test. She leisurely swayed her main tentacles and said. Roland immediately realized who Pasha was referring to. Is that guy still alive? Since he did not take advantage of the chaotic period of soul fusion to get more information, he did not expect to pry open the mouth of the senior demon. Now that it had fallen into the hands of the tequila witches, it could either choose to commit suicide or be tortured to death by its enemies. He thought that it had already become a ghost. It didn't go on a hunger strike. As long as you send it food, it will eat it up, Pasha said concisely. This showed that it did not want to die at all. He did not surrender, nor did he confess. It was waiting for the moment when the human race completely failed, and it regained its freedom. No matter how slim the hope was, it was still holding on. Was it because it felt that it was not worth dying in the hands of the worms? Chapter 1078. Grey Castle, the Old King's City, the Grand Theatre in the inner city. Warm applause came from outside the study, signifying the end of another outstanding performance. Cajun Fells had also come to an end. He took off his glasses and rubbed his tired eyes. Then he closed the script and put it back in the cabinet beside the table. The title on the spine was The Wolf Princess. Also in the cabinet were The Witch Story, New City, Dawn, and so on. These were the farewell gifts that May had given him before he left Neverwinter. Although many people in the troupe thought it was a blatant mockery, he accepted all of them and read them several times when he returned to the theater. It was not because the script itself was brilliant. The creator was undoubtedly a newbie, and the arrangement of the scenes was very straightforward, basically at the beginner stage of explaining the story clearly. It was because if he did not do this, there was nothing else he could do. Cajun found that he had lost the desire to write. Whenever he picked up the pen, the scene in the magic movie would appear in his mind. In the past, this stage should have belonged to the Grand Theatre. He could not imagine the positions of the actors and the placement of the scenery. It was like how he could not be satisfied with the sweetness of dew after tasting honey. In the magic movie, the whole world became a stage for the performance. There was no gap between the audience and the actors. This shocking scene opened a new door for him, but he was soon shut out. Cajun could not turn back even if he only took a glance at the stage. To be precise, it was not that he did not want to write anymore, but he could not help thinking about the magic movie. For example, the close-up of the prince's smile when he first met the princess, the bleak background when they parted. All these thoughts kept surging in his mind. The magic movie had given him many things he wanted to try, but none of them was related to the story of the theater. It was this contradiction that made Cajun Fells very uncomfortable. Only when he read through the script could he temporarily forget these worries. However, he also knew that this could only alleviate his anxiety. May was not willing to tell him, and the administrative office did not reply to him. This meant that Neverwinter had completely shut the door to him. He knew that he would have to suffer until he found a new channel to understand the magic movie. At this moment, a maid knocked on the door. "Master, there are a few letters for you." Cajun closed his eyes and leaned back in his chair. "Leave it outside. I'll look at it later." After the play, Rentgen, Egripo, and the others would usually come to the study to discuss their thoughts and questions about the performance. He planned to recover some energy before that. But there is a letter with the mark of Greycastle's royal family on it. "You told me that if it's a letter from Neverwinter, I must hand it to." Before the maid could finish, Cajun opened the door. "Where is the letter?" Startled, the latter hurriedly handed over a stack of letters, and watched as the dramatist picked the letter from the royal family, and stuffed all the other letters back to him. Then the door was shut. Cajun went back to the desk and broke the wax seal eagerly. It was a letter from King Wimbledon to him. Did the king finally know that Cajun's troupe had come to Neverwinter, and wanted to present a play for the coronation? If he could get in touch with the King of Greycastle, wouldn't he be able to find the magic movie? Cajun suppressed his excitement, unfolded the letter, and began to read. "How many roses did you get today?" Egripo asked jokingly on the way to the study. "About 10. I didn't count them." Rentgen shrugged. "Anyway, fewer than before. Although I don't care. If those admirers were to hear this, I'm afraid their hearts would shatter into two." Egripo laughed. "It's inevitable that the number of people will decrease. His Majesty sent half of the nobles to the mines, and this place became the old king's city. Naturally, fewer people will come to watch the play. But as long as the city is still there, everything will gradually return to how it was before. I think it's good enough that there are still people sending flowers," Benny said, twitching her mouth. "There used to be 6 troops, but now there are only 3 left. I hope we won't become the next one." Rentgen's expression also became a little emotional. "Yes, that war really changed a lot. Ahem, ladies, we also have to see the benefits." Egripo coughed twice. "Wasn't the rapid expansion of Cajun's troupe because they recruited people from the 3 troops? We can't control the succession of the throne, but it has happened so many times in history. Everyone is still alive, isn't it? Anyway, cheer up. Teacher is still waiting for us. Don't let him see us being discouraged." At the mention of Cajun Fells, everyone nodded involuntarily. Teacher Cajun seemed to have aged a few years since he came back from Neverwinter. It was all May's fault. She refused to reveal the origin of the magic movie, and even used the possibility that it might be related to the secret. Since things had come to this, they naturally had to work harder. "Teacher, sorry to disturb." Egripo walked to the study and pushed open the door. He was slightly stunned. The atmosphere in the room seemed to be a little strange. Cajun was not sitting on the soft couch waiting for them as he usually did. Instead, he was standing in front of the table in a daze. After a long while, he looked at them and said, "Come in." "Teacher, what happened?" Bernice also noticed that Cajun was acting strange. "There's a letter from Neverwinter. It's from His Majesty." Cajun picked up the letter from the table and handed it to everyone. "Take a look. Is this okay?" "It's okay." Egripo took the letter after getting a nod. The others immediately gathered around him. Looking at their expectant faces, Cajun sighed inwardly. Obviously, they were thinking the same thing as he was when he read the letter. Someone had secretly obstructed the transmission of the news, causing the troupe to return to the old king's city without accomplishing anything. Now that His Majesty had found out, the person who had obstructed them would be in trouble. He had guessed the beginning correctly, but not the ending. His Majesty had indeed satisfied his curiosity. In the letter, he had briefly explained the principle of the magic movie. The key to the magic movie was an instrument created and activated by witches, which could record the scene of an incident. However, witches alone were not enough. It had to use some ancient relics. These things were extremely rare, and could only be found by chance. As a result, the instrument was also extremely rare. It was a priceless and rare item. Cajun wrote straightforwardly. It's the eve of a dangerous war. All the resources of the territories must be prioritized for the survival of Grey Castle. And the magic movie is no exception. I believe you've seen the shock it brings. It plays an extremely important role in spreading ideas and awareness. It's a pity that it can't be used in plays that have nothing to do with national policy. But this situation won't last forever. When the kingdom ushers in true peace, the magic movie will eventually become a new form of drama that everyone can film. By then, I believe that you and your troupe will be able to produce excellent works. If that was the case, they could only feel helpless. Unfortunately, His Majesty did not think so. He had received the notice from the administrative office from the very beginning, and the person who had rejected the new script was none other than Roland Wimbledon himself. That was the biggest blow to Cajun. It turned out that it was just his wishful thinking to present a gift for the king's ascension to the throne. In fact, Cajun did not take the preparation of Cajun's troupe seriously at all. If the king did not like their new play, the promise of producing excellent works in the letter would be nothing more than a cliché. Chapter 1079. After reading the letter, everyone fell into a strange silence. After a while, Bennis muttered unwillingly, I knew I shouldn't have expected Prince Roland to bless me. Thinking about the places he frequented in the king's city and the rumors about him, I thought the ascension would make him. Shoo, Agrippa pulled Roland's arm. Be careful with what you say. All the nobles here are His Majesty's supporters. Even if they're not, they'll pretend to be. If they hear you say that, you'll be in trouble. Rentgen sighed and said, I guess we'll never set foot in the new king's city again. That's not bad. We're quite popular here, aren't we? Agrippa comforted her. Cajun troupe can be regarded as a first-class troupe anywhere except Neverwinter. It won't be a problem for us to make a living. The magic movie will come to the old king's city sooner or later, Cajun suddenly said. I've been reading May's plays over and over again these days and found that they all have one thing in common, which is that the audience is subtly influenced by a fictional background, and that background is the future planned by His Majesty. Since it's a tool to spread the king's ideas and will, how can it only be shown in Neverwinter? By then, will you still be so confident in your plays? Agrippa was stunned. We can go to other places such as the Kingdom of Dawn. Teacher, as long as you ask, the theater there will be willing to let us stay there. Cajun shook his head and said, I won't go to the Kingdom of Dawn. Then, the dramatist looked up and said, I want to go to Neverwinter again. What? Teacher? The three of them turned pale with fright. It takes at least a month for the troupe to go back and forth to Neverwinter, and during this time, we'll barely have any income. Agrippa hurriedly tried to dissuade them. It's fine for us, but I'm afraid that the newcomers and apprentices won't be able to make ends meet, which will affect the troupe's stability. Cajun of course knew this. It would be fine if the troupe had a fixed theater to perform in. Otherwise, they would have to prepare all the props and materials by themselves, which was not an easy job. However, what he meant was not what they thought he meant. I won't take the troupe with me. This time, the apprentices were stunned for a longer time. Then, what are you going to do? To compete for the magic movie, Cajun said slowly. Although His Majesty said that magic movies will become popular sooner or later, he didn't mention a specific time. 10 years or 20 years. In any case, I can't wait that long. Even if it's only 5 years, the Starflower troupe will reach an unprecedented height. By that time, it'll be too late for us to catch up and start from scratch. The best time to catch up with a wave was right before it leaped out of the sea. The problem is that His Majesty already has the Starflower troupe. Bennis murmured. In the beginning, Starflower troupe only consisted of Star and Flower. Cajun glanced at his disciples and said, Plus, I haven't changed my mind. An outstanding performance must be honed behind the scenes to reach its best level. Since Starflower can't handle the drama arranged by His Majesty alone, we might be able to solve it. If I can beat him in the theater, I might be able to get a chance to perform in the magic movie. You're going to act in those plays? Agripo asked incredulously. If I want to get one part, I have to give up the other. Cajun nodded. But even if it's a play, it's not a reason to slack off. I'll do my best. Cajun paused for a moment. Of course, His Majesty may reject this request. In that case, I'll join the Starflower troupe in my own name. Do any of you want to come with me? No one answered. Cajun did not know whether they were still in a daze or unwilling to leave the old king's city. Maybe both of them. Cajun was not surprised. In fact, he was shocked when the idea popped up in his mind. Just as Agripo had said, even if he went to the Kingdom of Dawn, he would be able to gain a high position with his reputation. It would not be an easy choice for him to give up on this. Moreover, he was old. His memory was not as good as before, and his legs were not flexible enough. What kind of roles could he play on the stage? Usually he would play unimportant supporting roles. No matter how good he was, he would still be a joke in the eyes of others. It could be said that from the moment he became successful and moved from the front of the stage to behind the scenes, he never thought that he would make a comeback one day. Since His Majesty could not accept his script, and he could not write stories like New City and Dawn, then he could only give it a try as an actor. Was it too incredible? Cajun looked at his apprentice's expressions as if he could read their minds. Yes, it was indeed incredible. After making this decision, he felt a sense of relief that he had not felt for a long time. He was indeed old, but strangely his heart seemed to have returned to more than 30 years ago, when he first went to the theater with his family and watched a play. At this moment he could not suppress his excitement and impulses, which were almost exactly the same as when he was young. He had countless reasons to stop himself, but in the face of this possible opportunity, all his reasons were useless. Agripo has been with me for the longest time, and he knows how to run a troupe. When I'm not here, he'll temporarily manage it, Cajun said calmly. Recently, there are many talented newcomers in the troupe. Let them perform more. As long as the plays are rehearsed normally, there won't be any problems. Teacher. The three of them wanted to say something, but Cajun stopped them. He followed the voice of his youth. That voice was telling him. He wanted to act in the magic movie. In the city of Neverwinter, the western region of Grey Castle. As Roland had expected, the speed at which the napalm could be weaponized was astonishing after the right materials were found. In just 1 week, the Ministry of Chemical Industry had put the trial product in front of him. It was about 10 iron buckets with a diameter of 30 centimeters and a height of about 1 meter. There were detonating explosives in the center of the iron buckets, and they were connected by wires. Your Majesty, this is the city-burning Skyfire Thunder I designed, Retnine said excitedly. It has 3 layers, namely the special snow powder layer, the combustion supporting layer, and the fuel layer. In order to make the fire spread more widely, the 3 layers are not simply wrapped. Instead, they are like inverted mushrooms. The snow powder fire will hit the combustion supporting layer, and the fuel layer like an erupting volcano. And Retnine, who used to be the chief alchemist of the alchemist workshop in King's City, probably felt that it was not easy to get the opportunity to replace Kyle. His many designs really made Roland's eyes light up. In addition to the directional ignition configuration and the combustion supporting layer, Retnine also mentioned the idea of delayed detonation for the first time. Using the precise and controllable characteristics of electric detonators, multiple explosives could be detonated in sequence to reduce the impact on each other and increase the lethality. Roland had to admit that this group of people who stood at the top of the industry had extraordinary talents. For example, Retnine seemed to be particularly enthusiastic about the use of chemicals to make explosions. The only thing that made Roland doubt was Retnine's style and taste in naming. However, this was not a big problem. After all, he would be the only one who had the right to name them after they were officially equipped with the army. Chapter 1080. The test site was a flat valley in the impassable mountain range. Surrounded by mountains, there were few people around. It was difficult to enter the valley from the outside without using tunnels or airplanes. It could be said that this was a dangerous place in the mountains, and it was very suitable for doing things that needed to be hidden from others. It was not because the napalm weapon was mysterious, but because there were a few people in the audience. Ah, the air here is really good. I can smell the fragrance of flowers and soil. Celine crawled out of a crack in the rock stratum and shook her tentacles. It's been more than 200 years since I last saw the blue sky. Retnine shuddered. He looked at Roland with a panicked expression. Anyone who saw a giant blob monster emerging from the ground would feel fear. If this was a disaster movie, this kind of classic appearance would definitely be a mini-climax that would require a special soundtrack. Not to mention the inexplicable voices in his head. One could be considered a qualified officer of the administrative office, if he was not frightened on the spot. That was also the reason why Roland chose to test the weapon in the valley. Don't worry. They used to be human beings, but they became like this because of the demons. He patted the alchemist on the shoulder. The voices you hear are their minds talking. If you want to talk to them, just say it or repeat it in your mind. Like this. He turned to Celine and said, with the mobility of the original carrier, it's not difficult to see the blue sky and clear water, right? As long as you don't get in the direct sunlight. That's because she always locks herself in the research room, Pasha said. The gods' punishment witches have been talking to me about what they've seen and heard in the dream world recently. There's a word you use to describe this phenomenon. It seems to be called otaku? Why do I remember there are two adjectives in front of this word? The last one to show up was Alka with the senior demon. Are you sure you want me to say it out loud? Okay. Roland raised his eyebrows at Retnine. What do you think? They're not that scary, are they? Why, you're right. The latter forced a smile. By the way, although they lost their human appearance, they gained an almost eternal life. At the same time, the new skin had extremely high resistance to heat and corrosion, which meant that it could directly touch most chemical reagents. The tentacles were numerous and sensitive, so there was no problem even if it was conducting multiple experiments. In other words, this body is the most suitable form for chemical research. How about it? Are you interested in learning more about it? Roland shrugged. Gulp. Retnin's throat moved. After a while he replied awkwardly, I don't think so, Your Majesty. Although he said so, the way he looked at the senior witches of Tequila was not as evasive as he had been at the beginning. Instead, there was a hint of curiosity in his eyes. Roland shook his head with a smile and walked to the demon who was tied up tightly. Even though the other party had lost his legs, he still had all the restraining techniques he should have. After all, this body was still a divine punishment body. He squatted down to the same level as the other party. I remember your name is Kabo. Radhabi, right? Without the telepathic connection, the demon could not understand Roland's words even though he was occupying a human body. However, he still expressed his thoughts with his eyes. The undisguised hatred and hostility transcended the racial barrier. Even though they did not speak the same language, they could still understand each other. Roland continued indifferently. This is a fireworks show specially prepared for you. You've committed numerous crimes in the Land of Dawn and destroyed half of the human kingdom. Now it's our turn to avenge you. You can enjoy the show now. Then he nodded to Retnine. Get ready for the experiment. The alchemist glanced at the demon and replied loudly, I won't ask questions until His Majesty takes the initiative to explain. Yes, Your Majesty. After everything was ready, everyone entered the bunker tunnel, leaving the demon alone against the mountain wall. Countdown to ignition. 10-9. 1 detonate. A guard in charge of operation turned the hand-cranked detonator. In an instant, a ball of red flame rose in the center of the valley. Unlike the demonstration of high-yield explosives in the previous artillery exercise, the flame this time was not bright, and even looked a little dim. The flame was surrounded by a large amount of black smoke, which looked heavy and thick. Both the sound and the degree of shock were far less than the earth-shattering explosion. But soon, everyone felt the uniqueness of the new weapon. Through the observation hole, they clearly saw that the black smoke did not disperse quickly. Instead, it rose slowly like an opaque curtain. It was not so much a cloud of smoke, but more like flaming magma. The scorching airflow pushed the fuel high into the air and scattered it like an open umbrella. When the umbrella was fully opened, the flashing red light did not disappear. Instead, it became brighter and quickly turned the falling fuel into flowing flames. Roland knew that it was the effect of the aluminum powder and iron oxide in the combustion-supporting layer being ignited. The heat released by this reaction seemed to bring about a second continuous explosion. The whole process took a few seconds. The rain of fire splashed in all directions, and the places that came into contact with it immediately ignited a new fire. Even though he had left enough of a safe distance, he could still feel the bursts of hot wind blowing on his face. Under the effect of gravity, the black smoke and the flames finally completely separated. The former dissipated in the sky, while the latter completely dominated the earth. There used to be a forest and a stream in the center of the valley, but now there was only a crackling sea of fire. As for the experimental animals, Roland felt that it was no longer necessary to check them. On the other side of the tunnel, Elsa could not help but curl up her main tentacle. If only there were such weapons in the Tequila era. Because the red mist was afraid of fire, the demon's outpost was always surrounded by barren land. It was impossible to disperse the red mist with just a few piles of firewood. Even if the witches found a way to create a high-temperature fire source, it would be difficult to do anything without magic power. But this weapon gave her hope of quickly eradicating the outpost. As long as she could transport it in, she could open a path for the follow-up army. And her comrades did not have to die helplessly under the attack of the demons and the red mist in order to buy time for the mortal army. She seemed to see the mist storage tower covered in flowing fire burning, until it turned into a dazzling pillar of fire. The mind communication that only belonged to the original carriers passed quickly in the minds of the three senior witches. They did not even need to speak to understand each other's thoughts and emotions. Amidst their conversation, Urcha quietly shifted his gaze to the mortal man, and sighed to himself. It was such a pity that he wasn't born 400 years ago. The fire lasted for nearly 4 hours before it gradually subsided. There was only a piece of scorched earth left in the valley, and there was nothing left to burn. Roland walked out of the tunnel, and felt that it had suddenly changed from early spring to midsummer. A large amount of hot air had accumulated here, turning the valley into a temporary greenhouse area. He looked at the demon leaning against the rock wall. Because it had been cleaned in advance, the fire did not burn near the bunker, and the god's punishment body could not feel the scorching heat, so it should not be hurt. But the demon's eyes were staring straight at the scorched earth in the distance, and there was a hint of gloominess in its expression. This was probably the result that Pasha and the others wanted to see. The tequila did not consider the possibility of the demon giving in or surrendering. They just wanted to let the demon know. Chapter 1081. These rails are the last for today. Leaf poked her head out from the crown of the tree. Thank you. Leave it to me. Molly patted her flat chest and whistled. Come out, my servant Momota. A blue sphere emerged from the void and quickly expanded to the height of a tree branch. It stretched out its two transparent arms, scooped up the steel rails on the ground, and swallowed them. However, the rails were too long, and it was not realistic to swallow them completely. Therefore, the front and back ends were exposed, and at first glance, it looked like a sphere that had been pierced. Momo. Tower? I remember you called it Momoka last time. Did I? Molly tilted her head. But that's not important. The important thing is to shout it out. That will make you look imposing, right? Leaf thought for a moment. Did Mystery Moon tell you that? Hey, how did you know? Molly asked curiously. She also invited me to join the detective group. Since the release of the magic movie, Lorgar had made a deep impression on everyone when she transformed into a giant wolf and pounced on the enemy for the sake of her sister. Later, the detective group added fuel to the fire. Shouting slogans while displaying their abilities had gradually become a fashionable practice among the young witches. This was not a secret in Neverwinter. However, Miss Leaf had stayed in the Misty Forest for a long time, and the last time she showed up was at His Majesty's coronation ceremony. It was beyond Molly's expectation that she knew so much. No, it's nothing. Leaf coughed twice and turned to look in the direction of Neverwinter. There are new supplies entering the forest. I'll go there first. Although Molly was eager to know the answer, she tried hard to suppress her curiosity and waved at Leaf. In the blink of an eye, the latter turned into a flickering spirit and merged into the shadow of the tree. It was said that this ability could make her appear from one end of the misty forest to the other in an instant. As long as it happened in the forest, there was nothing that Leaf did not know. Thousands of trees could also become the foundation for her to absorb magic power. Because of this, she could control the plants to continuously transport building materials to the front line. The efficiency of the magic servant was not even worth mentioning compared to this. This was the power of an evolved ability. Molly wondered when she could become like Miss Leaf. She had been in Neverwinter for about 4 or 5 months and could read and write well. After learning the principles of nature, it should be her turn to evolve. She climbed onto the head of the magic servant and controlled Momota to walk out of the forest. As soon as she left the forest, a bustling scene immediately appeared in front of her. 1, 2, 3, rise. A little more to the left. Slow down, slow down. Nearly 1,000 workers were standing on both sides of the railway that extended to the northeast, repairing Tower Station 0 in an orderly manner. As the first stop on the way to the Tequila Ruins, it also served as a cover for the terminus of the forest. 4 blockhouses were located at the 4 corners of the station, connected by trenches and retaining walls. Workers dressed in various colors, some of whom were even bare-chested, walked through them. If one did not know His Majesty's plan in advance, it would be difficult to associate this place with the front line just by looking at this scene. Oh, isn't this Miss Molly? Thank you for your hard work. Sorry to trouble you again today. The train crew is really busy. Miss Molly, there's a steam engine here that has fallen. Could you help us fix it? The magic servant slowly walked through the crowd with the railway. From time to time, people would greet her or ask her for help. She had only been here for a week, but many people had already remembered her name. Although Molly's main task was to prevent accidents from happening to the Seagull, as long as someone asked for help, she was happy to lend a hand, just like she had done on Sleeping Island. Molly also felt happy when she saw others smiling and thanking her. What made her even happier was that on Sleeping Island, only the witches and a few people from the fjords would thank her. Apart from loading and unloading the goods, there was not much she could do to help. Here, however, people treated her like a celebrity and needed her help everywhere. As the saying went, the more gratitude one had, the more happiness one had. As long as the Seagull did not take off, she would take the magic servant along the railway for a whole day. After leaving Tower Station 0, the scenery along the way changed again. Columns of smoke vaguely appeared in Molly's field of vision. Those were the traces left by the trains. In fact, these steel beasts were the main force that replaced Leaf. They constantly transported materials out of the forest and to the front line, as if they would never feel tired. The railway she carried was only a small part of the remaining steel beasts. Unfortunately, according to Princess Tilly, these big guys were not that easy to make. So far, Neverwinter only had 2 or 3 of them. This was also the reason why the Seagull needed to frequently travel between Neverwinter and the front line. No matter what happened in the war on the fertile plains, the production in the rear had to be maintained. The closer they got to the end of the railway, the more soldiers in uniform she saw. After a week of observation, Molly could roughly distinguish between new soldiers and experienced soldiers. Those who sat on the ground listening to the instructor's instructions and stole glances at her from time to time were the former, while those who were concentrating on cleaning the weapons in their arms and ignoring her were the latter. Look carefully. These are the known forms of the demons. An instructor tapped on the picture on the small blackboard. The most common is the mad demon. It's burly and has thick arms. It can throw bone spears accurately, but it can't throw them continuously, unless it's desperate. Ha ha ha. The crowd burst into laughter. Stop laughing. The instructor scolded. When you see it, I'm afraid you'll be so scared that you'll wet your pants. At this time, neither running away nor surrendering can save your poor little lives. The only right thing to do is to aim at it and pull the trigger. Kill it before it kills you. Do you understand? Yes. The crowd responded in unison. Then let's look at the next picture. He pointed to another picture. These monsters with eyes on their foreheads are the fearsome demons. Although their numbers are far less than the previous one, they're much more powerful. As long as they see you, you'll be so scared that you can't move and can only wait to be slaughtered by the enemy. This kind of strange mental attack can be restrained by the God Stone of Retaliation. Those who go to the front line will also be given God Stones, but you can't guarantee that one day you'll run into them without any God Stones. Then what should we do? Pray to your grandmother, or imagine someone or something you like in your mind. In short, do what you usually do to overcome your fear. After hearing this, Molly found that someone was looking at her. She smiled and winked at the person. Hey, where are you looking at? The instructor roared. If you don't want to listen to the lesson, go to the construction site and carry cement. The person quickly retracted his head. Alas, compared to the veterans, the new recruits are more likable. Molly curled her lips and controlled the magic servant to move forward. After walking for another few hundred meters, she could see the forefront of the track. Workers, soldiers, and witches were working together to build the railway further. The most eye-catching person in the crowd was a girl with long flaxen hair in a work uniform. Chapter 1082. Princess Anna was not the most outstanding witch in terms of height, dress, or appearance. For the convenience of construction, she tied her soft hair into a ponytail. Although the uniform was the only style designed by His Majesty, it did not seem to take aesthetics and comfort into account. The cuffs and collar were tightly bound together. Also, because of the long time spent in the wild, the clothes looked a little dusty. If it was the first time seeing such a scene, it would be impossible to associate her with the Queen of Grey Castle. But Molly was very envious, because even if she did not know the identity of the Queen, she would know that she must be an important person. The people around Anna were all senior officials of Neverwinter, such as Car Van Bate, the Minister of Construction Edith Kant, the head of the General Staff, and so on. The direction of the railway, the speed of progress, and the construction arrangements all needed to be discussed with Princess Anna. In other words, even if she was not a witch, she was still the focus of everyone's attention. Although Molly couldn't understand what they were discussing, she still felt that Anna, who was standing at a high place and looking into the distance, holding a map and gesticulating with everyone, was really cool. Especially her pair of lake blue eyes, which shone like a flawless gem when she was concentrating on her work. In front of such a person, whether it was a new recruit or an old soldier, they would involuntarily pay their respects. Molly thought for a while and finally decided not to disturb Princess Anna. Instead, she drove her magic servant to avoid the crowd and unloaded the railway in the yard area. You went to the forest again? As soon as the railway was put down, Shavy stuck her head out from behind a pile of bricks. Molly had a bad premonition. She ran to the pile of bricks and saw a familiar playing card on the ground. Well, if it isn't little Molly, Andrea grinned. Beside her was a witch who seemed to be at a loss. Maggie, how could you laze around and play cards here? Molly shouted. If people find out, what will they think of our sleeping spell? I'm going to tell Lady Tilly. Yes. They forced me to come here. Maggie lowered her head and pointed at her index finger. Who's slacking off? Shavy was unconvinced. I brought these red bricks down from the train. Otherwise, the workers would still be unloading them. I'm only relaxing after I'm done with my work. How is that considered slacking off? You have to know that work and afternoon tea are equally important. Being able to juggle both is the most elegant way of doing things. Andrea stroked her golden hair and said, Besides, with Maggie here, I'm sure no one will find us. After all, it's not allowed to involve Lady Tilly. You can rest assured about this. By the way, do you want to join us? No matter what, 4 people is more interesting than 3 people. Of course not. Just as Molly was about to refuse, she was interrupted by an urgent alarm. Woo, woo, woo. 3 trumpets meant that the enemy had been discovered. She hurriedly looked to the northeast, but she could see nothing except the mottled snow and weeds that had not completely melted. It's either Sylvie or Lightning who discovered the enemy. If they issued a warning from that distance, you won't be able to see them. Shavy reminded her. Oh no, Princess Anna. Molly suddenly thought of the Queen of Grey Castle, who was still at the front line of the railway. She had heard more than once that Anna's ability was irreplaceable for His Majesty and Neverwinter. Since that was the case, she had to bring Anna back safely. Before she could take 2 steps, she was caught by Shavy. Princess Anna naturally has guards around her. You won't be of much help even if you go there now. Shavy shook her head. Even with the speed of the flying demons, they have at least 10 to 15 minutes to prepare before they find the enemy, which is enough time for them to hide. And according to the principle of avoiding danger, if there's no combat mission arranged in advance, the first thing to do when encountering an unexpected enemy is to protect yourself, and then approach the first army, Tequila God's Punishment Witches, or other combat teams. So you don't have to go anywhere, just focus on protecting me. Andrea was already standing on top of the brick pile with her spear. Next is my job. Just as Shavy said, when Molly climbed up the pile of bricks, the huge construction site was already empty, as though the bustling scene from before had never happened. She could vaguely see human heads surging in the trenches. Black guns were set up, and the train had also stopped moving. The entire front line was suddenly filled with a chilling atmosphere. Sylvie, did you discover the enemy? Andrea took out a sigil of listening from her bosom. How many? No, it's Lightning's warning. After a while, Andrea replied from the sigil. The enemy seems to only have 4 devil beasts carrying mad demons on their backs, and they're on your right. There's no sign of senior demons. Only 4? Seems like it's just a chance encounter. Maybe, but don't let your guard down, Sylvie warned. You should be able to see them in 5 minutes. A moment later, the demons arrived as promised. The 4 black shadows were particularly eye-catching under the clear sky. Undoubtedly, they had also seen the railway line on the fertile plains. But strangely, the demons did not immediately attack, but hovered in the distance. Why are they hesitating? Shavy frowned. This doesn't seem like the style of demons. Can you hit them? Molly asked. No, they're too far away. Andrea shrugged. Even if I toss all the coins, none of them will stand up. Of course, there's another way. Molly automatically ignored the part that she did not understand. What way? For example, changing to a bigger gun. Andrea smiled and pointed to the side of the brick pile. Can I borrow your magic servant? At this moment, Molly noticed that there was an astonishingly large firearm placed there. Just the barrel alone was more than a meter long. At the same time, she immediately understood what the other party meant. It was impossible for a single person to operate such a heavy weapon. Do you also carry this when you play cards? It's all thanks to Maggie. Andrea spread out her hands. And it's only a basic requirement for a warrior to carry a weapon that might be useful with you. Molly did not say anything. She raised her hand and summoned her magic servant, grabbed the huge firearm, and put it on top of her head. At the same time, she ordered Momota to lower its body and spread out into an oval cushion. It's a pity that I didn't bring you with me last time. Andrea laid on top of the gun and tried to feel it. This gun seat is much more comfortable than Ash's. Raise your head a little. Yes, this is the angle. What about now? Molly adjusted the shape of the servant. Just right. By the way, can you shrink its arm? As small as the thickness of a finger. That's not a problem, but it won't be able to grab heavy objects this way. That's okay. Just keep it like this. Andrea stuffed the shrunken servant's arm into her ear, and then held the gun. Don't forget to plug your ears. As soon as her voice fell, she pulled the trigger. A loud bang came from the muzzle. Chapter 1083. The other 3 demons immediately responded. They controlled the devil beasts to scatter, and flew back in the direction they had come from. Soon they disappeared into the sky. While retreating, one of the demons turned around and threw a spear into the head of the flying mount, which had half of its wing broken, and was spiraling down. Even though Andrea had been staring intently at the target, the second coin did not appear. They actually escaped? Shavy exclaimed in surprise. What are they doing here? It was the first time for the demons to escape before the battle. In Andrea's impression, this ferocious group would never stop until they had bitten their target. It didn't look like it was attacking, nor did it look like it was scouting. It just kept circling back and forth, which was quite surprising. I don't know. Andrea released the trigger. And they seem to have figured out how to avoid being sniped. It seems that the enemy is also a quick learner. Don't you think so, little Molly? She smiled and looked at Molly, who was rubbing her ears. You should have warned me earlier next time, Molly complained. The weapon was as loud as a cannon, and she almost failed to protect her ears in time. Even so, the thunderous sound still made her head buzz. Sorry, I didn't expect the guiding line to appear so soon. Maybe my ability has improved again. Andrea blinked. To apologize, I'll give you a special compensation. How about it? You didn't mean it, so it's fine. Molly scratched her head. After all, it's more important to defeat the enemy. But that will always make me feel bad. Looking at Andrea's serious eyes, she had to agree. What's the compensation? Chaos drinks, Andrea said, covering her mouth. Are you sure? Molly asked in surprise. When she was on Sleeping Island, she only knew that Andrea was not only from a prominent family, but was also one of the most powerful combat witches. Her status was comparable to that of Ash's. Besides, Andrea had always been with Lady Tilly, so she did not have much contact with her. After coming to Neverwinter, the barrier between combat witches and non-combat witches had completely disappeared. Only then did she realize that Roland was not as cold as she had imagined, but was instead an elegant and friendly person. But she did not expect Andrea to be so generous. Yes, the normal rule is 1 cup for each round. My special compensation is that if you lose, you don't have to drink from me, and if I lose, I'll still have to pay for it to you. How about it? This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So that's how it is. Only entering and not exiting is indeed. Wait, that's not the case. Molly came to a realization. In the end, we still have to play cards. Such lazy behavior, But you already agreed just now. Stay here and don't leave. I'll go to the command center and report the situation. I'll be right back. Before Molly could open her mouth to defend herself, he had already jumped off the pile of bricks and disappeared at the end of the yard. She looked at Maggie, who had a sympathetic look on her face, and finally understood the meaning of, "They forced me to come here." At the frontline command center, within half an hour, all the information about this unexpected encounter had been gathered in front of Iron Axe's desk. The first to discover the traces of the demons were Lightning and Maggie, who were wandering around the perimeter of the security perimeter. At that time, the two of them took turns flying through the clouds, one in front of the other, and coincidentally avoided the demons' line of sight. After that, they tailed the demons in the 6 o'clock direction, and used the sigil of listening to warn Sylvie. According to Lightning's description, the demons' flight path formed a clear straight line on the map, which connected the railway front line and the Tequila ruins. In other words, the demons were not patrolling and guarding, but were coming for the first army from the very beginning. The whole encounter lasted about 15 minutes, and Miss Andrea was the only one who achieved victory. The anti-Devil Beast sniper rifle was the only weapon that could hit a flying target at this distance. After losing one of their members, the remaining demons immediately chose to retreat and swayed left and right to avoid follow-up attacks. This proved to be an effective tactic, and Andrea did not get another chance to attack. Sylvie kept an eye on the demons as they left the security perimeter. Lightning and Maggie did not take any further action. 15 minutes later, the alarm was lifted. Iron Axe put down the report in his hand and heaved a sigh of relief. This was the integrated war intelligence system formulated by His Majesty. The warring units would report their actions to the general staff level by level, and then the information would be sorted out and refined by the staff to restore the whole process of the battle. With the help of the map and the sand table, the military command would have the most intuitive understanding of the battle situation at the front line. Although Iron Axe had practiced the system several times before the expedition, it was still the first time he used it in practice. For the first time, he felt that the war was so clear. It was as if he was standing on the clouds and overlooking the whole process of the battle from the sky. In Iron Sand City, even a battle between hundreds of clans could be chaotic. It was time-consuming and laborious to sort out the victory and defeat, and most of the time, only a shallow conclusion could be obtained. But now, whether it was the actions of the enemy or the reactions of his own side, they were all presented in his mind. This feeling of knowing everything like the palm of his hand made Iron Axe feel that the battles of the Majin clan were at best just brawls. Of course, it was not enough to understand the overall situation. The next most important task was undoubtedly to figure out the demon's intentions. Iron Axe looked at Edith, who was staring at the map. She was also the only one who did not discuss with the other staff. Iron Axe did not regret telling His Majesty the truth about his secret contact with the Pearl of the Northern Region. His Majesty was the one he swore to serve for the rest of his life. Even if it meant betraying the Pearl of the Northern Region, he would not have a second choice. However, he felt guilty for doing this, and he was prepared to be ridiculed or ignored by Andrea. Unexpectedly, Andrea acted as if nothing had happened. Even after being punished by His Majesty, she would still invite him to some gatherings of the general staff, but they would not discuss political affairs alone. Now that he thought about it, he really did not understand how women thought. It had been like this since the time in the southernmost region. Did you find anything? Iron Axe walked up behind her. No. Edith shrugged. I'm not a demon. How can I know what they're thinking just by meeting them face to face? You didn't discuss it with them. I thought you had a clue. It's meaningless to discuss it without any clues. You can neither confirm nor falsify it. It will only make you worry. In that case, I'll take it as the General Staff's conclusion and report it to His Majesty. Iron Axe nodded. If even the Pearl of the Northern Region could not figure it out, then this matter would end here. Go ahead. Edith paused for a moment. But what? I don't think this matter will end so easily. If the demons really want to attack us, they will definitely take action in the near future. What happened next confirmed Edith's opinion. Only 2 days later, the demons appeared in the northeast again. There were also 4 mad demons. Chapter 1084. Miss Sylvie has confirmed that there are no other demons nearby. If the enemy attacks from this distance, we'll have at least 5 minutes to react. 5 minutes is enough for the anti-aircraft machine gun squad to get ready. What about the threat? There are no senior demons among the known enemies, so the threat to Her Highness is almost zero. If we continue the construction as usual, the biggest loss will probably come from the rail transport team, which is crowded and inconvenient to evacuate. We estimate that there will be 1 or 2 casualties. The command center was a mess. After analyzing the information and discussing it repeatedly, the conclusions were listed on the display board one after another. This was also a habit that the staff of the General Staff had gradually developed. In the face of complicated information, words were harder to ignore than words. In summary, Phil and Sylvie put her hand on her chest and said to Iron Axe, "We think that continuing the construction is more profitable than defending. This may make the demons understand our intention, but this is within His Majesty's plan. As for the 4 flying demons, we just need to keep a minimum watch on them." In short, the conclusion that all the intelligence gathered was not afraid of the threat. Although the role of the advisor department was only to assist in the analysis and provide suggestions, and the final decision was still made by Iron Axe himself, this conclusion coincided with his idea. The First Army was no longer the ancient army that it had been 400 years ago. Even the vanguard troop of 5,000 soldiers was enough to be called a giant. It was impossible for the 4 mad demons to shake the First Army. Exchanging the death of 1 or 2 mercenaries for the destruction of the First Army was not even a loss to His Majesty's plan. After all, the risk of coming to the barbarian land had long been written in the contract. Iron Axe looked at Edith, who did not say a word. In the command post, silence meant acquiescence. When Iron Axe was about to give orders to his adjutant, Edith suddenly said, "I see. Then let the construction team resume work, the anti-aircraft machine gun squad remain on guard, and the others stay on standby as usual. She was not talking to him, but to Agatha, Phyllis, and the others. Do you have a way to directly swat those flies to death? You mean, take the initiative to attack? Agatha frowned. Yes, I always feel that it's not a good thing to keep them watching. The Pearl of the Northern region nodded. As far as I know, the two girls who can fly have extraordinary combat abilities, right? With the cooperation of Miss Chen-Shi, they might be able to catch them all in one fell swoop. This is beyond the capabilities of the First Army, and only you can do it. This. Agatha hesitated. In theory, only when there are two demons will their attack be risk-free. Otherwise, once the enemy threw a spear, it would be very difficult to dodge at close range. Even if we let Andrea attack first, there are still 3 left. She spoke more and more slowly, for even she herself felt that this speech was rather forced. Since it was a war, it was impossible for there to be no risk. Moreover, this was a war that would decide the fate of the entire race. In order to survive, thousands of witches had died under the butcher knife of the devil. Lightning was no different from the others. However, the fact was that after entering the fertile plains, Agatha had noticed that lightning was acting strangely. Although she had tried her best to hide it, Agatha, who had experienced the battle of divine will, was no stranger to this state. It was a state of confusion caused by encountering an unimaginably strong enemy. It was precisely because the enemy was so strong that it created an illusion that it was impossible to defeat them. As a result, many blessed army witches who had been fighting for a long time could not escape. If they wanted to adjust their state, they could only rely on themselves to recover bit by bit, apart from drugs and abilities. In order to defeat the demons, Agatha did not care about the size of the risk. As long as the reward was big enough, she would not hesitate even if it was a suicide mission. She believed that the other tequila survivors would also make the same choice. However, lightning was different. In this state, forcing her to face the demons was no longer a matter of risk, but a matter of sending her to her death. She was not afraid of risks, but she could not personally push the other party into the abyss, especially the other party who called her sister. After waking up in Neverwinter, she found that she had been changed a lot by these witches. Is that so? Edith raised her eyebrows and unexpectedly did not insist. What if it's just to drive them away? We can use the magic arc to hide ourselves and let Miss Dawn find a chance to kill them. I think it's better than letting the demons watch us. Agatha and Ironax looked at each other and said, "No problem. I'll inform the Special Operations team." In the following 10 days, the demons and the First Army formed a strange tacit understanding. Almost every day, a team of devil beasts would wander around the perimeter of the defensive line. Sometimes there would be 2 or 3 teams, and they would appear in different directions. However, in Sylvie's vision, their movements were not hidden at all. Often, before they entered the visible range, the First Army would know their whereabouts in advance. Probably because there was no opportunity for them to take advantage of, the demons did not launch any attacks except flying along. In the beginning, the existence of the demons had a certain impact on the construction team. However, after a few days, everyone got used to this situation and continued to work hard. After all, the potential threat was far away, but the reward was right in front of them. The only inconsistency during this period came from Andrea. Every time a demon was hit and fell, the crowd would burst into enthusiastic cheers. This process was completely unpredictable. Sometimes it did not happen in a day, and sometimes it even happened 2 or 3 times. Although most people did not know about the existence of the Special Operations team, there was no doubt that this was the countermeasure taken by the army. There was even a new way of gambling among the workers. That was to guess the demon's doomsday. How many demons would come today, and how many would go back? This kind of little game was very popular among the workers. As the construction was progressing smoothly, the First Army soon advanced to the second railway node. According to the battle plan, stations would be set up every 50 kilometers along the railway line that was not protected by the misty forest. The reinforced concrete blockhouses were enough to ensure that the First Army could defend against demons several times their number, with a small garrison. At the same time, the vanguard and the middle army could take care of each other, and the logistics would become more convenient. Armored trains cruising on the railway line would protect the stations. Even if the demons destroyed a section of the railway, it would not be too difficult to repair it. It could be said that with these stations, it would be impossible for the demons to uproot the Black River in a short time. They were like nails that firmly rooted the First Army in this vast and fertile land. Chapter 1085. After nightfall, the whole camp fell into a deep silence. The people who had been busy the whole day were now completely asleep, and the witches were no exception. However, Lightning did not feel sleepy at all. She had been like this for almost half a month, or rather, from the moment she left the concealing forest, she had felt an inexplicable uneasiness in her heart. The wound that was pecked by Maggie also began to ache, as if it was reminding her of what had happened that day. Lightning could not even tell whether the pain was her illusion or not. She tried many ways to distract her attention, but all of them ended in failure. However, with the naked eye, the wound did not change at all. It did not disappear, nor did it expand. It was like a scarlet spot stubbornly staying on her chest. This feeling of confusion made her feel haggard. She could not fall asleep until 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning. Even so, her short sleep would be filled with nightmares one after another, and she would wake up at the slightest sound. Looking at Maggie, who was sleeping soundly on her head, Lightning sighed to herself. She covered the quilt that Maggie had lifted, quietly got off the bed and walked out of the room. The witches' camp was located in the center of the camp, and there were God's punishment witches guarding the perimeter. She did not want to alarm the guards, so she directly flew out of the camp and finally landed on the track under construction. The bright moonlight shone on the road under her feet, and both sides of the track seemed to be reflected with a silver edge. The night wind blew through the field shrouded in darkness, bringing not only the rustling of the bushes, but also the sounds of birds and insects. In the past, Lightning would have enjoyed such a night scene for a long time, but now she had no mood to admire it at all. She did not even dare to look in the direction of Tequila. The monster hidden in the dark land seemed to be staring at her all the time, and every time she glanced over, the wound on her chest would remind her of this fact. Lightning looked at the crossties under her feet, and a bitter taste rose in her mouth. After more than a month of recovery training, she finally managed to overcome her fear and cross the low border wall of Neverwinter. She had thought that as long as she persevered, even if she could not face the senior demon of Tequila again, she could at least return to her normal state. But the result ruthlessly crushed this idea into pieces. Not only could she not use her awakened ability freely, but she always felt restricted when she flew. Even when she encountered ordinary demons, she lost the little bit of courage she had in the past. Otherwise, no matter what the enemy was up to, she and Maggie would be able to annihilate the 4 mad demons. Unfortunately, she could only follow the enemy from afar and wait for them to retreat on their own. It could be said that she was dragging everyone down. Thinking of this, Lightning couldn't help but feel a little teary. No matter how he tried to hide it, he couldn't hide it from everyone forever. Even the slow-witted Maggie could sense that something was wrong with her recently. Perhaps one day, she would abandon her timid self and fly to a higher place by herself. When that time came, what would she do? I'm so useless. Lightning squatted down and buried her head between her knees. I'm so scared of demons that I'm not qualified to be the leader of the exploration group. They'll definitely laugh at me if they know. I always boast that I'm the greatest explorer, but I'm more cowardly than anyone else. Yes, a voice in her heart seemed to answer. They'll laugh at you sooner or later. But I don't want to see that day. Her voice was a little choked. Who told you to always boast and think you're infallible? If you don't want to see them laugh at you, the only way is to leave here and go to a place where no one knows. Otherwise, you can't avoid it. The only way is to leave. Here? That won't do, someone suddenly said. Huh. Lightning was stunned and suddenly raised her head. She saw a familiar figure standing not far away. Under the white moonlight, the figure's long ears and tail were particularly eye-catching. Lorger? Ahem. The wolf girl coughed twice. Just to be clear, I didn't mean to eavesdrop on you talking to yourself. At this moment, she noticed that Lorgar was covered in sweat, which was reflecting the moonlight. Her wheat-colored skin, which was unique to the Majins, was like a bright stone covered with morning dew, appearing extremely clear. Were you training just now? Yes, I'm not born with great strength like the extraordinaires. Even if I become a desert wolf, I still need to strengthen myself through training. Otherwise, I can't even run a few steps, let alone fight. Lorgar spread out her hands and said, recently, the demons haven't taken the initiative to attack, and I promised the Great Chief not to leave the position without permission. I can't even guarantee basic activity, so I can only come at night to make up for it. Really? Lightning suddenly came to her senses. She quickly took a deep breath and covered her face with her hands. You heard everything? There was no need to answer this question. A wolf's ears had always been extremely sharp. She immediately felt her face heating up. Well, Lorgar paused and said, I've never comforted anyone before, so I won't comfort you now. I just want to tell you a story about my father. Although he was born in the Wild Flame clan and inherited the name of Burning Flame, no one thought that he would become the chief of the clan at that time, because among the 8 successors he had one obvious weakness. He was afraid of strangers and did not dare to go out alone to participate in the joint hunt. This is also an important event for the Majins to select a chief. After all, the chief is not only the internal ruler, but also the external influence. Each clan will send out their most outstanding younger generation to prove their strength. Lightning could not help but be stunned. Did she hear it wrong? Not long ago, the person who was afraid of strangers was in the limelight at the Neverwinter Sports Meet, and even attracted the attention of His Majesty. Could it be that Lorgar's father was actually someone else? In fact, when he told me these things, I didn't believe it at all. I even asked my grandfather to confirm it. Lorgar smiled and slowly walked over to her and squatted down beside her. But it turned out to be true. When I asked my grandfather why he passed the position of chief to my father, he told me that Gwels might not be able to do anything alone, but as long as he was accompanied by his clansmen, he would be the most powerful warrior in the clan. Since that's the case, it's better not to let him be alone. And it's normal for the clans to stay close to each other most of the time. Compared to this, what can a hunt prove? Lightning felt her heart tremble. Actually, what father and brother did in Neverwinter. I'm quite happy. Lorgar lowered her ears. Because father did what he could never do alone for me. Although it was a little embarrassing. Oh, is that so? You left them in the castle hall, and ran back to the witch building alone. You even said you didn't want to see them again, although it was really inappropriate to meet them in that dress. I think my grandfather probably wanted to tell me that courage comes from my own heart, and can also be drawn from others, Lorgar said slowly. If that's the case, why do you care about one's courage? Similarly, if your companions in the exploration group were in danger, would you abandon them and run away alone? Lightning was silent for a moment and said, Thank you. As I said, it's not a consolation. It's just a story. The wolf girl tilted her head. So you don't have to thank me. Besides, the exploration group is quite interesting. Since you dragged me into it, I have to be responsible to the end. She felt a little sore in her eyes again, and quickly rubbed them twice to calm her breath. When she was about to answer, Lorgar suddenly turned around and covered her mouth. Shoo, what's wrong? When Lorgar released her mouth, Lightning asked in a low voice. Did you hear something? Sound? She raised her head and listened carefully. There was nothing but the gentle night breeze. Wait. Where are the chirps of the night owls and insects? Something's coming from that direction. Lorgar pricked up her ears and looked at the night sky in the east. The whistling is. Watch out. She hugged Lightning and rolled down the roadbed. Chapter 1086. What the hell happened? Lightning felt dizzy. When she came to her senses, she found that she was surrounded by finger-thick black needles. These non-reflective crystals were evenly distributed around the track like pitch-black blades. Then several similar explosions came from the direction of the camp, completely breaking the silence of the night. This is an attack. The enemy is launching a sneak attack on the expeditionary army with the spider demons. By the time she realized this, the second wave of rumbling had already appeared. However, this time, the sound was clearly much more muffled, and it did not come from the air. Instead, it was transmitted to her feet through the tremors of the ground, as if something heavy had smashed into the ground. Oh no! Lorgar groaned. That's the position of the Longsong cannons. In the middle of the night without lights, they accurately identified the position of the camp and attacked the cannons from the very beginning. Was this really something that the demons could do? And why hadn't the alarm been sounded yet? We have to go and warn everyone. Since Lightning had sneaked out to relax, she did not wear a special flight suit, nor did she carry the talisman for communication with her. She had no other choice but to fly over, even though the sound of explosions over the camp was much more intense at this moment. She grabbed Lorgar, but failed to pull her up from the ground. You! Lightning turned around and was surprised to find that a long needle had been nailed into her leg. The wound was bleeding and half of her pants had been dyed red. She suddenly felt her chest tighten. If Lorgar had not done this to save her. What are you thinking about? Lorgar grinned. Even if I didn't meet you, I would still be attacked, and maybe even worse. At least the stone needles that fell on the periphery were not stained with the demon's blood. This is just a skin wound. What skin wound? Obviously, the bones were broken, and the amount of blood loss was not even sure if the major blood vessels were injured. If there was, the needles could not be easily pulled out. But to leave her here to look for Nana? If the spider demons attacked again, Lorgar would almost be a live target lying on the ground. Lightning's mind was filled with countless thoughts, and she didn't know what to do for a moment. Listen to me. Lorgar pressed her shoulder. You have to contact the big guy running on the railway. You mean the Black River? Lightning was surprised. But now, even if there is no alarm, as long as you are not deaf, you should have heard the sound of the attack. The wolf girl panted and endured the pain. The key is the next counterattack. If I heard correctly, at least half of the enemy's attacks are aimed at the Longsong cannons, and it doesn't sound like simple stone needle projectiles. I don't know what's going on over there, but if the enemy succeeds, we won't have any weapons to suppress them. You know what that means. This meant that the spider demons would be able to pour black needles into the encampment unscrupulously, and there would be no safe place in the entire defensive line. Lightning nodded. Phew. Then hurry up. Lorgar gave her a push. Don't be fooled by the fact that this is the first place to be attacked. In fact, it's not dangerous. That attack wasn't aimed at us. Look over there. Lightning looked in the direction where the wolf girl was pointing, and saw only half of the wooden sentry tower at the end of the railway track, as if it had been swallowed by darkness. So don't worry about me. Go find the Black River. The wolf girl gritted her teeth and shouted, You're the only one who can do it now. She was right. There was no faster way to notify the armored train cruising between the front line and Station Zero than to fly there. Lightning clenched her fists and looked at the wolf girl for the last time. She forced herself to turn around and fly toward the encampment. At this time, scattered gunshots could be heard. As Lorgar had said, the entire encampment had been awakened. Although they did not know where the enemy came from, no one was going to sit around and wait for death. The same went for the witches' barracks. The gods' punishment witches were the quickest warriors. Not only did they not sleep for long, but they also did not need to take off their armors when they fell asleep. At this moment, they were rushing to the battlefield in groups of 2s and 3s. She rushed into the barracks and saw Maggie running around anxiously. Where have you been, Ku? Maggie rushed up to her and hugged her. Why didn't you tell me you were going out, Ku? I'm sorry. Lightning suddenly felt a pang of guilt. She had thought that Maggie was careless and didn't know what fear was, but the truth was that Maggie didn't care about the fear of the senior demons for too long, but that didn't mean that she would forget about her companions. We'll talk about it later. I have to go to the Black River. Now. I'll go with you, Ku. No, you're needed here. Lightning wanted to say yes, but she refused. I'm afraid that Sylvie can't take care of the entire encampment by herself. The more people who can spy on the demons, the better. Snap out of it. She couldn't be a burden to everyone anymore. One more thing. Before that, I need you to do something for me. Lightning put on her flight suit as fast as she could. She brushed aside Maggie's long hair and cupped her cheeks. You have to promise me. You have to do it. This is the most important task of the exploration group. Coo. Maggie blinked. Find Nana. Take her to the end of the railway. Lorger is badly injured. She's lying in that area. Bring her back safely. Do you understand? Maggie nodded. Coo. Then I'll leave it to you. Lightning touched Maggie's forehead with her and flew straight out of the barracks. As they climbed higher and higher, Lightning noticed the reason why the alarm had not been sounded. None of the 5 sentry towers outside the defensive line were left standing. Apparently, the first wave of the enemy's attack was aimed at the sentry towers. These sentry towers were supposed to be solid concrete bunkers. However, Tower Station Number 1 had just been built. They did not even have time to set up the barbed wire outside the trench, let alone complete the fortifications. What made Lightning even more uneasy was that the gunshots came from inside the barracks, which meant that the soldiers were fighting with the enemy inside the barracks. So far, there was no sign that the defense line had been breached. Although the enemy was still attacking, they were all long-range attacks. Who were they fighting with? But the more she thought about it, the more she knew how important her responsibility was. I'm a coward. Yes. I lost to the senior demon. Yes. But I still have something I can do. Flying. Let it be afraid. I don't need to look to the north. I don't even need to face the ordinary demons. Now all I need to do is stare at the railway and fly. There is no reason for me to run away. Lightning sped up along the Black River, toward the forest. Faster. Faster. She urged the magic power in her mind. Gradually, a long-lost feeling welled up in her heart. When the long silent barrier was broken, the whole world became quiet. Chapter 1087. When the first explosion sounded, Danny had already jumped out of bed. Then came the sound of a storm above his head. And at the same time, soil and debris kept falling, as if the whole residence was on the verge of collapse. What happened? Is it an earthquake? His comrades also woke up from their dreams, and the pitch-dark room suddenly fell into chaos. No, it's an enemy attack. The soldier closest to the door grabbed his rifle and reached out to pull the door, but was pressed to the ground by Danny. What are you doing? Don't move, the attack is not over yet. Danny growled. As expected, a few more explosions came from afar, followed by a series of muffled sounds like rain. Ahem, damn it, that's... Amid the flying dust, someone lit a candle. When the faint candlelight dispelled the darkness, they could not help but gasp in unison. There were many sharp black needles on the bulging roof, which looked like a field of hair standing on end under the flickering candlelight. Spider Demon. The soldier pressed to the ground by Danny swallowed. Most of the members of the precision sniper team had participated in the first expedition, so they were familiar with this kind of enemy. Obviously, he also knew what would have happened if he had rushed out of the residence and encountered the needles. If I can go back alive, I must buy 2 lamb legs and visit Miss Lotus to thank her. Another man said, patting his chest. According to the usual fighting habits, the temporary encampment was usually a tent, but this time, it was changed to a mud kiln house built by witches. Although they did not know whether this was the consideration of the higher-ups, there was no doubt that this measure had played a key role. If it was still a cloth tent, they would have been riddled with holes. Don't say such inauspicious words. I'm still waiting to go back and get married. You're just trying to get close to Miss Lotus, aren't you? Nonsense, if you want to get close to her, it should be Nana, the little angel. Even though they were just a hair's breadth away from death, none of them were affected by this sudden ambush. Even though they were talking non-stop, their weapons and ammunition were already on their bodies. Obviously, these people all understood one thing. Death could not be avoided. It was either coming or not. Since he could still think about this problem, it meant that it was not time for him to die. Instead of worrying and being afraid, it was better to do something first, such as killing the enemy. Danny waited until the campsite was boiling before he pushed open the door and rushed out of the kiln. At the entrance of the barracks, there were a few sentries who had been impaled and were no longer breathing. At this moment, there were sounds everywhere, people shouting, gunshots, explosions, and the roars of demons. No one knew where the enemies were and how many there were. The lights of the sentry tower, which was supposed to be used for directions, did not light up. It was as if the enemies had appeared in the camp in a blink of an eye. He climbed straight to the roof, looked around for a moment, and found a place with the least amount of gunfire and ran, completely ignoring the shouts of his teammates behind him. "I thought you'd go where the most people are." Malt's voice chuckled beside his ear. This was why he loved to fight. Only in the midst of the smoke would his partner appear by his side again. "That means we have the upper hand, and I'm just the icing on the cake," Danny replied. "The intermittent gunfire means someone is in a hard fight, and only my bullets can bring salvation. I told you it's not your fault. You can't save everyone on the battlefield. But at least I can save everyone I see," he said with a smile. "Don't worry, I think it's good. It makes me see you more clearly." Danny turned his head, and sure enough, a familiar face emerged from the darkness and followed him all the way. When he approached the battlefield, he found a commanding height, a dozen randomly stacked iron boxes, and climbed up. As his vision suddenly became clear, he noticed that he was close to the position of the Longsong cannons, and several demons were using the bunkers to fight with the artillerymen. Obviously, the artillerymen, who lacked heavy weapons, did not have the upper hand. They could not suppress the enemy, nor could they seize the position when the demons threw their spears. In the distance between the barracks and the cannons, several people were impaled by bone spears and fell in pools of blood. How did they get here? I don't know, but their good days are coming to an end. Danny raised his rifle and aimed at a demon that was sneaking toward the barracks from the side. If it were to succeed, then it would probably give rise to a storm of blood in an instant. The demon had no idea that someone was aiming at it, and its whole body was exposed to the scope. Without hesitation, Danny pulled the trigger. A cloud of red mist rose from the back of the demon's head, and it fell from the roof. Even with only the moonlight to illuminate the distance, Danny would not miss at a distance of 100 meters. Well done. Pay attention to the left. Someone is moving. Danny saw 5 or 6 soldiers squatting in the corner, slowly moving to the edge. It seemed that they were going to risk their lives to enter the position against the demon's spears. Your courage is commendable, but your skills are zero. Without covering fire, you can't escape from the spears. Danny slightly raised the corner of his mouth. So why don't we wait a little longer? He quickly fired 3 shots at the demon's feet. The sudden splash of dust and the whistling sound of the bullets startled the soldiers, who had just taken a step forward. You'll be cursed to death by them, Malt said worriedly. Ha 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 ha. Danny finally burst into laughter. They'll have to be alive to curse me. He quickly turned the rifle and pointed at the mad demons who dared to show themselves. The demons who had been about to attack the barracks were completely suppressed, and did not dare to show themselves. At this moment, there was another sound of something breaking through the air. Watch out! Look over there! Following Malt's warning, several black shadows fell from the sky and plunged straight into the position. Bang! 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 The impact was so loud that the ground trembled slightly. In the moonlight, Danny was surprised to find that it was actually a few huge black stone pillars. After they landed on the ground, red mist spurted out from the stone pillars, and at the same time, there was a sizzling sound as if air was leaking. It was quite similar to His Majesty's steam engine. But he soon found out that it was not a machine. 3 stone slabs peeled off from the thick pillars and fell to the ground, bringing with them a large pool of blood. The pillars were divided into 3 parts, each of which was stuffed with a demon. They were wrapped in a living sack, like babies immersed in their mother's womb. When the scarlet liquid was discharged, they woke up and bared their ferocious fangs. But before the demons could walk out of the black stone pillars, a bullet accurately pierced through the head of one of the mad demons. Puff! The person who was shot swayed a few times before collapsing limply into the stone pillar. Chapter 1088. However, the enemy's attack did not stop. Instead, it became more and more intense. Later, a dozen more stone pillars fell from the sky, stirring up dust and red mist that almost blocked out the moonlight. The rubble hit the ground, making it difficult for Danny to even raise his head. Even the legendary Armageddon was nothing in front of this scene. One of the pillars fell right on the pile of iron boxes. The sudden impact sent Danny flying. When he came to himself, he was already lying on his back on the ground. Oh, damn it. He coughed and felt a sharp pain in his chest. At the same time, his mouth was filled with the salty taste of iron. Malt, are you okay? I'm fine. Malt's anxious voice rang in his ears. But you're hurt. I guess my ribs are broken. Danny gasped against the stinging pain. It's okay. As long as it doesn't hinder me from pulling the trigger, I can still fight. He fumbled with his arm until he felt a familiar touch in his palm. Fortunately, he had not lost his gun. No, you have to get out of here. The faster, the better. Malt's voice was almost begging. Danny struggled to prop himself up and leaned against the twisted iron box behind him. Just this small action had almost exhausted all of his strength. In front of him, a black stone pillar that stood like a high wall was spewing red mist. It seemed that it was about to open. Danny slowly lifted the gun. Since he could not exert any strength in his chest, he put it on his shoulder and used his knee as the butt of the gun. He did not think he would miss the target at a distance of less than 10 meters. Enough. Don't be stubborn. Why don't you leave? For a moment he felt that it was both Malt's scream and his own question. Because I don't want to stay away from this smoke, and I don't want you to disappear. The stone slab fell down, and at the same time, a gunshot rang out. The old friend in his hand did not let him down. Even before the enemy tore open the capsule, the bullet had already pierced through the target's head. But this time, the demon did not collapse. Indifferently, it walked out of the cylinder, shook off the broken sack stuck to its body, and revealed itself in front of Danny. It was a demon much larger than the mad demon, and its entire body was covered in strange armor. When it stood up straight, the elongated shadow shrouded him, as if it was covering the sky. In this darkness, only the enemy's eyes were glowing red. Danny pushed the second bullet into the chamber and pulled the trigger again. With a light clang, sparks burst out from the demon's chest, and at the same time, light blue ripples emerged, just like the surface of the water. The demon stared at him coldly and walked towards him step by step. He did not take out his weapon, nor did he quicken his pace. This was undoubtedly an expression of contempt. Danny mechanically repeated the actions in his hands, pulling the bolt, firing, and shooting. But the opponent just let the bullets hit him, not moving at all. No. Malt sobbed in despair. When he fired for the fourth time, a dazzling flame suddenly burst out from the demon's chest. Bang! Amidst the deafening sound, the man was sent flying, tumbling and crashing into the metal box. Looking at the smoke coming out of the muzzle, Danny could not help but be stunned. Then a man stood in front of him. Back off, mortal. The man slightly tilted his head and said, You're no match for it. From now on we'll take over. He held an astonishingly large firearm in his hand, and the bullets at his waist were almost as thick as a wrist. Obviously, this was not something an ordinary person could carry. Moreover, the newcomer was also covered from head to toe in armor, looking somewhat similar to the demon. Special Tactics Squad. An idea flashed across Danny's mind. Ever since the first expedition, this unit had become the most mysterious unit in the First Army. They never showed up during training, and no one knew their exact number or location. The only thing for sure was that they were all selected by His Majesty, and could be said to be the most elite combat force in Neverwinter. Roar! The demon crawled out of the iron box and let out a breathtaking roar. Compared to its previous disdain, it finally changed its attitude, and took out the double-edged sword from its back. Ha! A senior demon promoted from the Lord of Hell. No wonder the magic reaction is so strong. The man fearlessly rushed toward the enemy. And we've been living for this moment. Several soldiers in the same outfit followed closely behind him. After this group of people joined the battle, the situation gradually changed. Although they were carrying an astonishing weight, they could move at an extraordinary speed, forcing the enemy into a corner step by step. Moreover, their fighting style could be described as barbaric and violent. After emptying the ammunition, instead of looking for a shelter to reload, they stabbed their spears into the ground and madly hacked at the enemy. Although the demon was agile, it was surrounded by several lunatics at the same time, and the blue ripples on its body became dimmer and dimmer. Obviously, it had consumed a lot of energy. No wonder they were secretly trained by His Majesty. But this was also his stage. Let me back off. Unless I completely stop breathing. Danny gritted his teeth and moved his body. He used himself as a gun holder and aimed the scope at the battlefield. When a mad demon that tried to sneak up on the special tactics squad from the rear was shot down by a sniper rifle, the man turned around and stared at him from afar. Danny pulled the bolt and inhaled the lingering gunpowder smoke into his lungs. The sting and intoxication mixed together to form an indescribable taste. Isn't it a great feeling? Malt. Damn it. What the hell is the artillery battalion doing? Can't they make these damn stone needle rains stop for a while? Don't tell me they threw a bunch of rookies who just joined the army to the front line? In the trench outside the camp, the soldiers huddled under the eaves and complained incessantly. Fishball was one of them. Although he was in the anti-aircraft machine gun team, it was not the devil beasts that flew over from time to time in the night sky, but something even more incredible. It was not a good idea to stand outside and operate the machine gun. After they were awakened by the attack, they immediately stationed themselves in the defensive line according to the emergency plan. They encountered demons on the way, but they were soon knocked down by crossfire and mortars. As it turned out, the defensive line was not attacked at all. Their comrades on duty even asked them who they were shooting at in confusion. Just when everyone thought the next step was to clean up the scattered invaders, a new order came from above. No matter what the situation in the camp was like, they were not to leave the trench and be ready to fight the real enemy. A group of demons was attacking the camp from the east and the south. They were the main force of this night attack. Fishball couldn't help but recall the expedition a few months ago. The enemies swarmed toward them like a tide and ran faster than horses. Just the sight of them was enough to strike fear into anyone's heart. Fortunately, the First Army was well prepared. The dense firepower kept the demons at a distance of 200 meters. But now, there was no reassuring bunker on the defensive line. The artillery support was slow to arrive, and there was a wave of explosions above their heads every once in a while. Coupled with the extremely poor vision at night, he was not sure if this battle would be as smooth as last time. They're coming. Someone suddenly shouted. They're 1,500 meters away. Everyone, get ready. 1,500 meters. It's already good enough to see 200 meters away at night. Apparently, it was the witch with the all-seeing eye who gave the news. But the order from above was absolute. As long as the order was given, they could not retreat even if knives fell from the sky. Fishball clenched his teeth and prepared to enter the machine gun position. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.